Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Weeks.
And I'm Damen Lenz.
Yeah, special guest Assassin's Creed expert for this episode. I know nothing about this game at all, and Damen knows lots.
I know many, many things. I've been playing since Brotherhood, which is the third game in the series, came out in like 2010, and it was a major push for me around that time to get an Xbox. And I was like, please, can I have an Xbox? I want to play this game so bad. So I saw the Brotherhood trailer, and I was like, I must play this. And then I ended up, as the video game thing, I 100%ed Brotherhood, and then I went back, did 2, and then 1, and then I've stuck with it ever since. I'm just, I love Assassin's Creed so much.
Well, I'm excited to have you here, give a little context for some of these cards, and talk about the characters we need to know and talk about. I'll be here for the magic side.
And I'm here for lore, I guess.
Yeah. Also magic side.
Also magic, yeah.
If you hadn't picked up already, we're talking about the Universes Beyond Assassin's Creed set. This is a mini set. There's like 100-ish cards that come out in this set. There's no precons.
None.
They didn't do any of that. So it's just the Beyond boosters where you can pick up these singles. In this episode, we're going to cover all of the commanders that we think you're going to be most excited about building. We're going to cover a lot of the cards that you're going to be most excited about putting into your decks. We're going to try and cover as much Assassin's Creed stuff all in one episode. So stick around. And if you want to pick up any of the cards that we talk about, any of the sealed product, if you're an Assassin's Creed fan, go to cardkingdom.com/command. Card Kingdom has a huge selection of singles, sealed product. If you're building a new assassin deck, if you're building any of these decks, you can pick up a huge amount of cards for that deck all in one place. You're only going to have to watch the tracking on one package coming in the mail, and when it shows up, you're going to have a building frenzy. Sleeve them up, get it ready to play. I know when I'm building a deck, I don't want to wait for a couple of cards to trickle in. I'm using placeholder cards just to try and get to game night so I can play it. I want it all in one place so I can get playing right away. And we trust Card Kingdom to do that. Plus, when you shop with them, you're supporting the show. That's awesome.
That's a win-win.
Gives us a little bit of credit. So bookmark that link. Go to cardkingdom.com/command. And that way, every time you're shopping, you're automatically using that affiliate code. Again, if you're bookmarking affiliates, you could go over to ultrapro.com/command to pick up all of the highest quality Magic accessories in the business. UltraPro has sleeves and deck boxes, binders, everything that you need to be a Magic player, a gamer at all. If you want to pick up their hottest new item, go over and check out the Mana 8 product. It's bright white and has the giant mana symbols on it. So they're super sharp. They're super clean. If you're building like a mono red deck, you can have the white deck box with the red symbol in it, and I think the inside is red too. It's like very slick when you open it,
and it has this like very subtle patterning on it
on
for
white?
Each of the colors, which is really cool. Like the red one's a mountain, the green one's a forest, the blue one looks like waves, so on and so forth. So they're really cool. And with this, if you're going to build an Ezio deck, I'd suggest getting the white Mana 8 deck box, the white and red, because it's so like iconic of his colors and his clothing that's probably what I'm going to end up doing, honestly.
That's pretty sweet.
So
it's really sharp if you like a look for your deck. I know I'm very particular about the stylings on all of my decks. Go to UltraPro. They've got a lot of great options for you and some high quality stuff. ultrapro.com/command. The final way to support us is directly going over to patreon.com/commandzone. All of our patrons get access to special perks. You can get into our Discord, talk to me and Josh, Jimmy, the staff is all in there. You can ask us questions about the episode. You can give us feedback. You can tell us what you're excited about. You could vote on what we're going to draft next in our draft podcast episodes. Plus, you get access to exclusive content at certain tiers, and you get game nights and extra turns early. There's a ton of different perks at different tiers. So flavor to taste. Yeah. And all of that goes to supporting the show and paying for us.
100%. And if you want to jump in there and talk Assassin's Creed, I'll check it out. And I'll look to see if there's any tags in there. So if you want to just talk about Assassin's Creed stuff, I am happy. I'm happy to do it.
Plus, we shout out one lucky patron every single podcast episode. And this one is dedicated to Caleb Stallings. Caleb?
You rock.
We did it. Thanks for supporting the show. All right, let's get into it. We've got a lot of cards to talk about in Assassin's Creed. We're going to cover cards in the 99. We're going to cover the sweet legends. Just a reminder, this is sort of a weird set. They're not traditional booster boxes as we're used to.
Yeah, it's like almost like Aftermath that we had a year ago.
It's like slightly bigger Aftermath.
Exactly, but larger.
They're beyond boosters this time, so there's 7 cards in each pack, which I think is 2 more than Aftermath. I think Aftermath was 5
Something
more
like
in
that,
each
yeah.
pack. So they're sort of tiny packs, but they're all Assassin's Creed cards. So you can pick them up as sealed product if you're into cracking packs, or you can go over to Card Kingdom and pick them up as singles. The collector boosters are also a little different. They only have 10 cards in the pack. So these are smaller packs than we're used to. Not my favorite thing, especially if you're looking for specific cards to open, but that's what they're doing. So now you know.
Yeah.
The first commander we're going to talk about, it's Basim Ibn Ishaq.
That's right.
Yeah.
You did it.
I did it. This is a cool little blue-black commander. It's Dimir, so it's blue and a black for a 2/2 legendary human assassin. Whenever you cast a historic spell, remember Artifact, Saga, Legend, we're going to be talking a lot about historic spells today, draw a card. Basim can't be blocked this turn. This ability triggers only once each turn. Whenever Basim deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So this feels very simple.
Yep.
Like, it's blue-black, you draw a card when you cast historic stuff, and he can, Yeah,
when you cast a historic thing, you draw a card.
You draw a card.
You just only
That's
do
the
once.
first one.
And he's unblockable.
It makes him unblockable, and then when he connects,
He grows.
he gets bigger.
Yeah, he has like the weird, the vampire mechanic from Original Innistrad where when they hit you, they grow.
Yeah,
So,
and you're like, perfect.
Perfect.
I would have preferred you grew
That a little
before,
bit
but
sooner,
all right.
but that's okay.
That's fine. You're 2 mana.
Yeah.
But I like a lot about this. It feels very restrained. It feels very simple, but it's also super open-ended, where it's like historic leaves the door open for a lot of different ways to build this.
Yeah, you can do just the legendary creatures thing with combat damage triggers because you have a guaranteed creature who is going to be unblockable pretty much every turn.
It should be every turn.
Yeah. You could just go straight artifacts because historic is open in that way. You could go equipment. That's another way. You have an unblockable creature. Every time you play an equipment, it's unblockable. And you drew a card.
It's also just 2 mana. So like a very cool play pattern with this is you play this on 2. Like it's nothing on 1. You play this on 2. You play like a 3 mana rock on 3.
Yep.
Which is more like you get higher ceiling for your mana rocks and it fits into your curve better. He's unblockable right away. You draw a card and you connect for 2.
Yep.
And that's a great little start that you can easily build around with this kind of thing. And I love a commander that just suggests the early game is sort of taken care of.
Yeah, it's so efficient. It's having a 2-drop in the command zone. We're like, I know what my early turns are going to look like. And you've built around leveraging the fact that I'm going to have a commander earlier than most people.
Right.
And this is something that we haven't really seen in Dimir, doing Dimir legendary creatures or Dimir equipment or Dimir artifact, any of those. Like blue does artifact stuff, black really doesn't, and Dimir has always been a very like controlling type of color combination. This is it feels a little bit more aggressive because you have a commander that wants to get in. He continues to grow as the game progresses and keeps your hand full, which is really nice. I also love the fact that they had the foresight to have it only be once each turn, because otherwise this would just be an eggs list.
Then
it would be boring.
And then it's boring. But this means you can play like a 3. You can curve out with historic permanents, and it still is very powerful. It's drawing you 1 card a turn, keeps your hand full, keeps your board growing. I just really like how clean this is, and I think it has a really nice, strong play pattern. If you want to build around legends, let's talk about that, because blue-black legendary creatures isn't
it's not a thing
unless you built Rona.
Sure, yeah.
Which is sort of like legendary reanimator-ish.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of play pattern. So the first thing I looked at was legends that care about when other creatures or when themselves deal combat damage. So I was like, you got to get Grazilax, Illithid.
Love me a Grazilax.
Everybody knows a Grazilax. So whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. And whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may return it to its owner's hand. This is a great little curve as well. Basim on 2, Grazilax on 3, draw a card, attack, hit, counter, draw a card.
Yep. And then pretty much every turn, I'm at least going to draw a card because my commander is going to be unblockable. And then let alone if you get in with anything else.
Yeah. I mean, Gix helps with that curve as well, the 3 mana.
Does the exact
3 mana
same thing,
Yawgmoth Praetor, yeah. I love that like cheap curve that just keeps... that it like applies pressure like a Gruul deck in blue-black, which is wild.
It feels good.
Yeah.
And, I like that he grows as the game progresses. As it goes, he will continue to be a threat. Eventually he's a 4/4. He's a 5/5. He's hitting for 6. He's hitting for 7. Oh, shoot. I'm going to die to that now.
You're like, wait, I have 11 commander damage?
Yeah.
Another one I like in this kind of deck is backgrounds are really great for aggressive, evasive, cheap creatures. And a lot of them are based on attacking a player with the highest life total, or they're based on dealing combat damage. So Feywild Visitor is my favorite one.
I love Feywild Visitor.
This card's great in this deck.
Yep.
So you play Basim on 2. On 3, Feywild Visitor says commander creatures you own have, whenever one or more non-token creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you create a 1/1 blue fairy dragon creature token with flying. So you just start building a little bit of defense, start getting some annoying creatures on the board. And that's going to go really well with your Grazilaxes and your Gixes and these kind of combat damage based.
Yeah, it's going to be your Bitter Blossom in this deck.
Yeah.
And it synergizes so well, and being able to leave up a little bit of defense, or now you have more attackers, or maybe it's sacrifice fodder. Who knows? You can use them in so many different ways. You throw in a Skull Clamp because why not?
It's great.
It's
and it's
feel
historic.
Really, yeah, and it's historic. It's just going to feel really good anytime you have your Feywild. The next one I'm also really hyped for. This card has been going in a lot of my decks recently. Shout out, as always, to New Capenna Commander, giving us the sweet, sweet tech. Mari the Killing Quill. 1 black for a 3/2 legendary creature, Vampire Assassin. Hey, there you go. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you exile it with a hit counter. So it's a little bit of graveyard hate. They can't do sacky shenanigans and stuff like that. And then Assassins, Mercenaries, and Rogues you control have Death Touch. Great. Sure, why not? And whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may remove a hit counter from a card that player owns in exile. If you do, you draw a card and you create 2 treasure tokens. So it's a little bit of ramp, a little bit of card advantage, graveyard hate. Like, this card is such a nice little package. I have it in my Alayla deck. It just feels so good every time you have it.
Right, because the fairies are rogues.
Because the fairies are rogues. Yeah.
I think when Mari came out, a lot of people were like, well, I want to build that. And then you look at all the assassins that existed, and they're all sort of just removal spells. And
there also was like not very many of them.
There's like 9 royal assassin variants. And you're like, this isn't a deck. This is like, nobody's going to let me play this. And now that Mari can go in the 99 of so many of these, predictably, there's a lot of assassin typal decks in Assassin's Creed. Mari's going to have a lot of different homes.
Yeah, and we just got Outlaws, which works so well with her too. It's just, I love it.
It's a good time. Mari's eating good. I was looking at legendary support in blue and black, and there really isn't a ton yet. We're getting more and more of it because historic matters tends to be a very common Universes Beyond
They do like flirting with that a lot, yeah.
But there's some, and one that I really like including in decks like this that I think people don't, like people sleep on a little bit, is the Peregrine Dynamo. It's a 3 mana, 1/5 legendary artifact construct. It has haste, and it says 1 tap, copy target activated or triggered ability you control from another legendary source that's not a commander. You may choose new targets for the copy. If you're building this as a Legendary Matters deck, you should have a ton of triggered abilities that you can copy with this. You can copy Gix, you can copy Grazilax, you can copy even Mari. Not the first ability, but the second one, if there's multiple things with hit counters on it, I believe.
Yeah, because she gives them that ability. So as long as the thing that you put the ability on was legendary, wasn't your commander, you can do it again.
Doesn't work with backgrounds because those are abilities given to your commander.
Right.
But it just means that all of your legends work twice as well. It's like a tiny roaming throne for legends.
Yeah, it's like a fair roaming
roaming throne because it says non-commander abilities. Why doesn't roaming throne say that?
They had the foresight to put that on the Peregrine Dynamo. It is wild that roaming throne. They're just like, who knows what that
Rona, Herald of Invasion, I already mentioned. It untaps when you cast legendaries. It's just a looter that you can dig through your deck, pitch things in the graveyard over and over again. And then one that came out in Doctor Who. That is actually incredible in this deck.
We're mixing our Universes Beyond as we have It's becoming more and more common because I think you're right.
Yeah.
They keep hitting the historic thing that you're just combining all of these different universes all into one deck. So this is K9 Mark 1. It's just a blue for a 1/1 legendary artifact creature, robot dog. Fantastic already.
Yeah.
It has negative. As long as K9 Mark 1 is untapped, other legendary creatures you control have Ward 1. Great with your commander. And then affirmative, 1 in a blue, tap, target legendary creature can't be blocked this turn. And then Doctor's Companion. That's flavor text.
Yeah.
So you just put it on another thing or on your commander if you couldn't get that historic thing that turn, and it gives you a little bit of protection, which is really nice.
A little bit of protection. It comes down before your commander, which is nice. It fits in that curve perfectly. He's a good boy. He's a good boy. So there's definitely a legendary build around this. I think if you're building it that way, you're just packing it with Assassin's Creed cards.
Yeah.
Just all of the legendary assassins you can put in there. These are good includes, but realistically, if you're building around legendary creatures, you're probably building around Assassin's Creed characters.
Yeah.
But if you're not necessarily as devoted an Assassin's Creed fan,
If you have not sworn the creed.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I think you build this more around equipment.
Sure. Yeah.
Equipment artifacts, of course, which
They're
means
historic.
they're historic, and you have an unblockable commander that wears equipment so well.
And he grows.
And he grows.
So he kind of solves, like, that's the thing with Voltron decks. It's like the things you're trying to balance is like keeping the commander alive, evasion, and big.
Yeah.
And he helps you with big and does the evasion.
Right.
So give him the protection, and
He's also cheap.
he's also super cheap. Yeah, even if he gets removed, you play him again on 4.
Yeah.
So
It's pretty slick. I think I would obviously put this deck full of combat damage triggers. Mask of Memory is one of my favorites. Give you a ton of card selection, sort of feast and famine,
Yeah,
sort
the
of
Josh Fair, sort of
that,
and then sort of.
whoever. Will all be very powerful in this deck. But there's a lot of options that are just as good and are less expensive.
I like how you put Quietus Spike on this list.
great.
3 mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has Death Touch, sure. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half their life rounded up, equip 3. So you're just hitting with your little Basim, and they lose half their life whenever you clock them. It's just like,
Basim
wow.
on 2, Spike on 3, attack, draw a card.
It's so good.
And next turn equip, and then who wants it?
Yeah.
That's a pretty scary curve out. So you do need some protection up. Maybe you've got Mark 1 to keep him,
Mark
keep
1
him a
to
little
keep
safe.
him a little bit ward. But the nice thing is you're also in Dimir, so like you're gonna have interactive pieces. Like
You
you'll
have
have
counterspells.
the things to keep your thing alive. So
Yeah.
it's so funny.
It's pretty scary. But also you can put like nice, which is attack triggers on it. When I'm building all in and I'm doing Voltron type stuff, especially I think this one lends itself to just piling all of the equipment onto Basim. I want to make sure that I have some way to build up a board presence as well to protect myself from the inevitable crackback.
Yeah.
Like you're going to be faster, but if 3 people decide you're going to die,
You can't outspeed 3 players.
they're going to try. They're going to get pretty close. So I like including something like Anduril, Flame of the West. Speaking of mixing universes beyond, give him this cool sword.
It's okay. We'll just pretend it was an Isu artifact. There was like some weird stuff.
Yeah, some crossover.
Yeah.
Doctor Who feels like Doctor Who does a lot of the time travel-y, see historical figures stuff that Assassin's Creed does too. So that feels like almost a more natural crossover despite all the alien stuff.
Yeah, despite the well, the thing is like Assassin's Creed like almost has that because the Isu they're not aliens, but they're like this ancient civilization and all of that. So like you can pretend a little bit, you know.
Not Doctor Who.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. But Anduril, when the equipped creature attacks, you make 2 tapped white spirit creature tokens with flying. If it's legendary, instead create 2 of those tokens that are tapped and attacking. So the spirits can't defend you the turn that you attack with them, but you start building up an army of flyers that do a similar thing to the background we were talking about before. They're great with your combat damage triggers. They're great just to defend your life total a little bit. They also wear equipment very well.
Yeah. I love this combining all of our little universes beyond and all of that all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, we're becoming a true Voltron thing, I think.
And then, last, throw in a little brass squire, be able to attach your equipment at instant speed, and he's historic, so it works on both axes. So, like, you play it, you drew the card off of it. Let's say your commander gets removed later. You play your commander, you can activate the brass squire immediately, get that equipment back on. You're right back where you started.
Yeah, I think we think about blue and black, and you don't naturally think equipment.
No, certainly not.
You're like, it doesn't have white. How am I supposed to do it without white? But blue has a lot of artifact support, and a lot of them do lend themselves to equipment very well. Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh, is, first of all, historic, which is great, but it also says the first activated ability of an artifact you activate each turn costs 2 less to activate. That's an equip cost.
Yeah.
So you can make the equip cost of something free. You can reduce it by 2. And then it's a little draw engine behind it, and it makes your commander unblockable. So something like that actually is a great equipment card, but doesn't exactly scream equipment.
Yeah. I feel like Wizards lately has been flirting with like a blue equipment stuff with some of the partners or some of the other just commanders of the goodness that care about any artifact. They lend themselves really well to equipment strategies. Or like you have Forensic Agiteer here. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you investigate, and then activated abilities of artifacts you control cost 1 less to activate, and it can't reduce it to less than 1. That's again reducing an equip cost. Boros has cards that do very similar things, and like when they were designing that, they weren't necessarily intending you to use equipment on it. They were thinking about the clue, but it works in the exact same ways for those equipment strategies.
Yeah. A couple more that we're going to mention before we move on. Oaken Siren is kind of sneaky great in decks like this. This is a common from Lost Caverns of Ixalan.
Yep.
This is the 2-mana flying vigilance. It's a 1/2, and then it taps to add blue. Spend this mana only to cast an artifact spell or activate an ability of an artifact source. So this wears equipment really well, and it taps to add mana for your equip costs, and it's historic. It just does a lot of the things that this deck really does want to do, and that makes you look at a common twice. Plus, it's so cheap.
And then I love both of these I have in several artifact decks. You have Urza, Lord High Artificer, and Shimmer Dragon. And Urza lets you tap your equipment for mana. Shimmer Dragon lets you tap your equipment for cards. Being able to leverage the fact that you don't really tap equipment, you attack with the creature, and then you just have these untapped artifacts. Being able to leverage that feels really powerful.
Oh, yeah.
So both of those are fantastic includes in this.
Yeah.
And Urza's historic.
Yeah, for sure. I think in this deck, if it's historic, you lean into it more than the other ones. So like Shimmer Dragon's very powerful if you're doing like a lot of equipment, but it's not historic. So it does cost you a slot later. That means that maybe you can't make your commander unblockable that turn. So I think you might play some stuff that we don't play as much anymore, but are still very powerful, like Silas Wren.
I do like Silas a lot.
Yeah, so this is 1 blue black for a legendary artifact creature, human. It's a 2/2 with Death Touch, and whenever Silas deals combat damage to a player, choose target artifact in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. A little recursion, a little historic. It's got evasion, so it wears equipment well. There's a lot to like about Silas in a deck like this.
Yeah, it feels good being able to be like, yeah, I'm doing this Dimir equipment deck. It's going to feel very unique and it's going to be pretty powerful, I think.
I think this is cool. It's definitely going to be really scary in the early game, so I wouldn't tap out quite like I would hold up a counterspell while you're the scariest player at the table, but they will eventually forget about you as other people sort of catch up to you. That's the problem with aggro strategies.
Yeah.
But
the nice thing is you're in blue, and being able to just leave up 1 mana for a counterspell will feel very powerful.
Absolutely. I think this is a really neat build. Speaking of equipment, the next one is an equipment, and it's one of the more powerful cards in this set, I think.
Yeah.
At least the ones that's going to be played a lot.
Yeah. I feel like I have tons of decks that this can slot into. It's Brotherhood Regalia. 2 mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has Ward 2, is an assassin in addition to its other types, and can't be blocked. Equipped legendary creature 1, equip 3. So 2 to play, 1 to equip to a commander or to any other legendary creature, because we're running more and more legendary creatures these days. It gives it meaningful protection with Ward 2. The assassin part is flavor text, and then it can't be blocked, which is fantastic.
Huge. I don't play Whisper Silk Cloak anymore.
Neither
it's too expensive for protection spells. There are similarly statted protection type cards, like Winged Boots is 1 in a blue. Equipped creature gets flying and ward 4, and that's equip 1. So that's a similarly statted equipment, but flying is not unblockable.
Right.
And it's in blue, so you're not always in blue.
Yeah.
Also redundancy, important.
The closest thing I can think of is Psychic Paper from Doctor Who. That's 2 to play, 2 to equip. The equipped creature has ward 1. It can't be blocked, and it's the name and creature type of the last chosen name. And when you attach it, you can choose a creature. That part is flavor text.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that one gives ward 1 and can't be blocked. This for 2 mana, still same cost to cast. A reduced equip cost if you're equipping a legendary creature gives more ward 2, and then still gives the unblockable. Like this, I've liked Psychic Paper a lot in many of my decks, and I think Brotherhood Regalia is just going to be better. Like ward 2 is certainly not hexproof, but it is a meaningful tempo hit where they are going to have a hard time removing your creature early. And then in that time, you've gotten to a good amount of use out of your thing. And unblockable is so good.
Yeah. I think if you like Whisper Silk Cloak, you should absolutely look at Brotherhood Regalia. Of course, if you're usually equipping your commander, which I rarely see Whisper Silk Cloak if you're not equipping your commander. It gives you that protection, gives you the unblockable. This card is going to be in a lot of decks.
Yeah.
As long as people know about it, which they don't always in these kind of decks.
That's true. But I hope. And the other thing that we talked about and I mentioned, if you want to make it feel a lot more like hexproof and you're playing Roaming Throne in your deck, because the equipment gives the equipped creature the ward ability, Roaming Throne will copy it. So if you're in any of those decks that cares about its commander and you're running Roaming Throne, which a ton of decks are, it turns that ward 2 into ward 4. And it's going to be impossible to remove.
I mean, this kind of protection is going to be enough most of the time. As long as you're not equipping something that is like a absolute lethal threat.
Yep.
Most of the time, ward 2 is going to be enough to push removal elsewhere.
Yeah.
If it's a card that, like, if I untap with this thing, someone is dead, then they're going to find the mana to pay for it, of course.
Yep.
But if it's just a value commander, if you're doing like a Basim type deck where you're like, I'm going to peck in, I'm going to draw a card, I'm going to need to counter a little bit of value, most of the time players aren't going to spend 2 extra mana to kill it.
Yeah, certainly. Although the funny thing is, even with Basim, early it'll be that where it's not a threat, and then late in the game it turns into the threat.
Bigger and bigger and bigger threat.
So
the card's so cool. I'm like really curious about what a Basim deck plays like.
You should build it.
I
think you'd like it. I think you.
I don't know that guy, but he seems nice.
I'll give you like a pamphlet on his lore and stuff like that. He was in the most recent game, Assassin's Creed Mirage, and he was actually originally from Valhalla, and then he got his own game later. But
that's fun.
Yeah, he's cool.
Up next, even if you're not an Assassin's Creed fan, you probably know this name. It's Cleopatra, Exiled Pharaoh. I don't know. I find it hard to believe that somebody wouldn't know her name.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing with this is you get like actual historical figures.
Yeah.
Like we're going to talk about the actual Leonardo Da Vinci later. Like this is just Cleopatra.
This is just Cleopatra. It's the one you're thinking of.
Yep, that one.
Yep. 2 black green for a 2/4 legendary human noble with allies. At the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 other target legendary creatures that you control or your opponents control. And then Betrayal. Whenever a legendary creature with counters on it dies, draw a card. For each counter on it, you lose 2 life. Okay, so this is like kind of Hepatra-ish.
It looks like Hepatra.
It's like countery, control-y stuff, but it's a little bit more political, which is cool. You can get benefits from sacrificing your own legendary creatures with counters on it.
Right.
You can get benefits from destroying your opponent's creatures with counters on them.
Yep.
And then you get to distribute the counters as you please, as either, political favor or just greedy, selfish interests.
Yeah, it's going to feel good. I don't know, maybe it'll happen, but it'll feel good anytime this happens. If you can make a deal with somebody and you're like, oh yeah, I'll put counters on your things, you attack that player, and then that player removes the thing that's attacking them, and you get to draw
magic cards.
Feel so good.
Instant speed counters are really, really good in this deck because it means that you can basically put bounty counters on stuff at instant speed.
Yeah.
I think bounty counter decks are really limited because when you put a bounty counter on something, it says, I'm going to kill that one thing. And now everybody's ready, and you can only do 1 a turn most of the time.
Yep.
And it means that the deck is fully built around removal and is very telegraphed.
Yeah.
But what I like about Cleopatra is it's +1/+1 counter based. Well, it's any counter based.
No, but she puts counter.
But she puts +1/+1 counters on it. So it could be positive. It could be negative. You could use it to benefit you on your own creatures. You could use it to benefit opponents on their creatures. You could use it to hurt opponents on their creatures. So it's a lot more flexible than like a more typical bounty type commander.
Something funny I literally just thought of right now. Since you can put counters on any legendary creatures, you could theoretically turn off your opponent's undying.
And be like, ha!
I don't know when that will come up, but it is something that could happen. And if it ever happens, please let me know. That is so funny. Where you just put the counter on the thing, you're like, if it dies, it's gone.
You could also help your persist cards, right? Like
you can do it with
counters
persist,
on
yeah.
it. Yeah, it's and they cancel each other out. I think most often the 99 of this deck is going to have some amount of control. You're going to have a lot of destroy effects. You're in black. And then you're going to have legendary creatures that like having counters put on them or benefit from having counters on them or just naturally have counters on them. I really like Rayhan Last of the Abzan in this deck. 1 black-green for a 0/0 human warrior. She enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever a creature you control dies or is put into the command zone, if it had 1 or more +1/+1 counters on it, you may put that many +1/+1 counters on target creature. She also has partner. So Rayhan can help distribute the counters for when she dies, but also just naturally has 3 counters on it. You could play Rayhan, sack her, draw 3 cards from Cleopatra.
Yeah, and you only lose 2 life. Like the life loss doesn't scale with the
number of counters.
With the number of counters, but the draw does.
Right.
So.
And then you save those counters and put it somewhere else.
Yeah.
The Ozolith, obviously great in this deck. So this is going to be a lot of like putting counters on your stuff and sacrificing them for value and putting counters on your opponent's stuff and killing them for value. And it is pretty fun.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of legends that work in this archetype.
I really like, you wrote down Bristly Bill from Thunder Junction, a menace. He's 1 and a green. I almost said a blue because I'm such a big blue player, but it's 1 and a green for a 2/2 legendary creature plant druid. He has Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. And that's important. Any creature. Could be your opponent's. And then for 3 green, double the number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So it really works well on every axis that you're trying to do. You put them on your things and you're going to benefit from that. You put them on your bonus thing, you're going to benefit that. You put them on your things and then you double them. You're really going to benefit from that. Like I could totally see you've built up a board state, your opponent successfully gets that wrath off. You're like, oh no, but real quick before everything dies, double my counters and then just get a full grip for when
just draw 8 cards.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to disincentivize certain kinds of board wipes because you're like, if I board wipe, you're going to draw 10 cards.
Yeah.
You can do some really absurd things in this deck, and a lot of the counter cards are really good at putting counters on your opponent's creatures too. I love that utility of Bristly Bill, and it also works with Rishkar. When Rishkar enters, you usually put a counter on 2 of your creatures because then they can tap for mana, but it can also put counters on your opponent's creatures, which I've never done, but you can do if you have Cleopatra in the command zone.
Yeah, especially I could totally see where you've reached a board state where you're kind of set up. Most of your things have counters or all of them already have counters.
Yeah.
And you just use them, put 2 counters on something that doesn't have counters yet. And then, you're not missing out on the mana then because everything you had already had the counters on it.
Yeah.
And then you just get to leverage Cleopatra's ability even more.
Yeah. Kodama of the West Tree is incredible in counter stacks. It's a legend. It gives all of your creatures with counters on them trample, and when they connect, you go get a land. It's
so much
absurd. It's very, very good in this style of deck. My cheeky favorite include is Vadmir New Blood. It's 1 and a black for a vampire rogue. He's a 2/2. Whenever you commit a crime, put a +1/+1 counter on Vadmir New Blood. This ability triggers only once each turn. As long as Vadmir has 4 or more +1 counters on it, it has menace and lifelink. Whenever you put a counter on an opponent's creature, that's a crime. So Bill, crime. Then this also gets a counter. It does lets all of your counters sort of do double duty.
Yeah. And you have a reasonable chance of getting those 4 counters on him to get lifelink, which will matter with her life loss.
Absolutely. And he's 2 mana. That's
he comes so early.
So cheap, comes down before your commanders, so that when you get her out, you already have another body to start putting counters on, which is great because Cleopatra can't buff herself. She's a queen. She can't get any bigger than a 2/4.
Yeah, but if of note, if you do put counters on her, her last ability does work with herself.
It does, yes.
So that's cool. So
yeah, but she can't buff herself.
Nah,
right?
she it's
each of up to two
other. Yeah.
Vraska joins up is sweet in this deck.
I like that a lot.
I love this card, and the art is awesome. And I was like, "Where are you going to play this?" And then immediately they printed a commander that's great with it. Vraska joins up, enters the battlefield, puts a death touch counter on each creature you control, and whenever a legendary creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. It puts counters on all your stuff, gives them death touch, and draws you cards for 2 mana on a legendary enchantment. That seems incredible.
It's also really nice because you probably aren't going to have a ton of ways or maybe any other ways of putting like death touch counters on things.
Right.
And that just represents so much defense. When like you're set up and you're the threat at the table and you're just like, everything I control has death touch. Come at me. Like that, it makes it really difficult for your opponents to meaningfully swing at you when you now have death touch things. If they trade, you draw so many cards and then like, it sets you up so well.
Yeah, it's also sweet with Kodama. Because all your stuff has trample and death touch now?
Yep.
Oh, no.
So now you're just like 1 damage there, the rest goes to you.
Seems good.
This next one is an oldie but a goodie.
Seems awesome in this deck.
Skullbriar, the Walking Grave. Black and a green for a 1/1 legendary creature, zombie elemental. It's legendary, so you can put the counters on it. As haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. It grows, just like Basim. Counters remain on Skullbriar as it moves to any zone other than player's hand or library. So when it dies, it retains those counters. When it goes to exile, theoretically, it retains those counters or anywhere else.
As long as it's revealed, as long as it's a revealed zone, so a library or hand are hidden zones, you can keep all the counters on it, which is so good with your commander. You can sacrifice Skullbriar, draw 3 cards, reanimate it from the command zone or from the graveyard. It already has those counters still on it, so you can sack it again and draw more cards, put more counters on it. It's just a very safe place to invest in.
Yeah, it's also crazy with the Ozolith because the Ozolith also gets the counters. They go to both places, which is crazy.
So those are the legends. There's some really cool stuff that you can do as a proactive way to use these counters. Obviously, green-black counters is a popular and powerful archetype.
Yep.
But let's talk about ways to get counters on their stuff and really be able to maximize that second ability on Cleopatra.
Yeah. So we have Unspeakable Symbol.
It is unspeakable indeed.
It is a 1 black for an enchantment. You pay 3 life and you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Very clean, very simple.
And you can do it at instant speed.
Yep.
I'm honestly not sure how great this card is in the deck because you're essentially would be paying 5 life for 1 card.
Yep.
But in a deck that is doing all this counter stuff and we already talked about ways to gain life, an instant speed way to be able to like, all right, when this stuff dies, I'm going to pay 6 life. I'll put more counters on this kind of stuff and I'll draw 4 more cards or something like that.
Yeah.
Is very powerful. So I'm curious to see if this makes the final cut on this kind of list, but it's instant speed counters that you can do repeatedly is pretty sweet.
Yeah, back in the day, I saw this card do a lot of work with Old Marchesa. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some cool, cheeky things, because maybe even after a border wipe, you're like, I will pay some amount of life to refill my hand.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is inefficient, but I will have more cards in hand than the rest of you. And so when I untap, I'm going to be able to be that much more explosive.
Right. Yeah. I like it a lot. Sheltering Ancient might be bad, but it's awesome. It's 1 and a green for a 5/5 tree folk with trample. Cumulative upkeep. Put a +1 counter on a creature an opponent controls. So you cast this for 2. You untap with it. You have to put 1 counter on a creature an opponent controls.
Yep.
And then the next turn, you have to put 2 creatures on a creature an opponent controls. 2 counters, excuse me. And then 3. So you're doing a lot of buffing. But this wears counters really, really well.
Yep.
You benefit from a lot of counters on the board. And it's only 2 mana in a deck that does want to have sack outlets. I think you got to put Sheltering Ancient in it. I think it's so cool.
I think it's great. And it's going to feel really good when you reach that upkeep where you're like, okay, put 5 counters on that. And then in that same turn, you remove that thing and draw 5 cards. It's just going to feel really good.
That rules. That's so sweet.
And then you could say you played the Sheltering Ancient and everybody will be like, what does that do? And you'll be like, let me tell you.
It's usually in Selvala decks, but this is neater. This is different. Up next is one of my favorite cards from Modern Horizons 3. It's Gift of the Viper. It's a single green for an instant instant, put a +1/+1 counter, a reach counter, and a death touch counter on target creature. Untap it.
1 mana, 3 counters. That's so efficient.
It's Ancestral Recall.
It is.
Basically.
Yeah, green Ancestral. You heard it here first. Gift of the Viper.
Basically, if they attack you with a creature, you can untap one of your creatures, put 3 counters on it, block, draw 3 cards from the creature that died, and kill the thing
And kill
that was attacking you.
And reach. You can block anything. It's so good.
That's so good in this deck. I love combat tricks, and this is the funniest removal spell I can think of. Yeah. Gotta put Gift of the Viper in the deck. Plus, it's flavorful.
It's Viper with Cleopatra. I like that. I like it. I like where you're going. Next, we have Chaville, Bane of Monsters, black and green for a 1/3 legendary creature human rogue, so you can wear the counters. Death Touch at the beginning of your upkeep. If your opponent controls no permanents with bounty counters on them, you put a bounty counter on target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. And whenever a permanent an opponent controls with a bounty counter on it dies, you gain 3 life and you draw a card. So a couple things, you're putting counters on your opponent's things. You're already trying to do that anyways. It totally negates the life loss that Cleopatra does, and it gives you an additional card.
Yep.
So
Chaville seems great. I think this is going to be an auto include in all Hepatra decks. Cleopatra decks. I was looking at Hepatra because she's next. The next section of this deck is the more controlling version of Cleopatra. And it's going to look more like a Hepatra deck. It's -1/-1 counters. Because now for each -1/-1 counter on it, if a thing dies, you draw that many cards, which is also extremely powerful. So you use the +1/+1 counters to buff your stuff. You use -1/-1 counters to kill your opponent's things and draw cards. It's very good.
And then Hepatra will give you snakes.
Yeah, so Hepatra, Vizier of Poison is obviously what this deck is going to be built around, but also Massacre Girl, Known Killer is incredible
Giving everything
in the
stuff
deck.
with her. Yeah.
It gives all of your creatures Wither, and then whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, draw a card. So if you can get it all the way down to 0, which you can with -1/-1 counters, if you draw additional cards off of it.
Next one we have is Yawgmoth, Thran Physician, 2 black, 2/4 legendary creature, human cleric, protection from humans. Sure, why not? Pay 1 life, sack another creature, put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature, and you draw a card, and then black, you discard a card, proliferate. So you're working on the axis of being able to proliferate, spread all those counters around, and you're putting bad counters on stuff that your opponent control.
Weird. It does have protection from your commander.
Yes.
Because Cleopatra is a human, so you can't actually put counters onto Yawgmoth.
Yes.
But this is a sack outlet for drawing all of your cards. It puts counters on your opponent's creatures. It draws you cards. It proliferates. Yawg does it all.
Yeah. Other than the protection from humans, he is so perfect.
He is perfect, yeah. Black Sun Zenith is a slam dunk in this deck.
Board wipe, you're going to put a bunch of counters on things. You're going to draw an absurd amount of cards.
Easily 9.
Yeah.
Just easily. All the -1/-1 cards are going to be really powerful. Archfiend of Ifnir is very good if you can include incidental cycling, or if you can draw above hand size, which seems very likely in this deck.
Hand size.
It says whenever you cycle or discard another card, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control.
Yeah, and that's going to be crazy too, because if you're above 7, you discard a hand size, he starts putting -1/-1 counters on. If those things die and they were legendary, you'll draw more, you'll keep discarding a hand size, and it's just this very neat engine that your opponents are going to hate.
They are not going to love it, but you won't keep Archfiend of Ifnir long. They will find removal for it fast.
Yeah, as they always do.
And then, of course, Blowfly Infestation is an essential card in this kind of deck. It's whenever a creature is put into a graveyard from play, if it had a -1/-1 counter on it, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. So usually you can kill a creature, pick off a 1/1, draw a card, pick off a 1/1, draw a card, pick off a 1/1, and then
it just keeps the engine going.
Yes, you can really use it to your advantage in a -1/-1 counter deck. Obviously, keep in mind, those are very controlling strategies. They're not right for every playgroup. Yeah. But you can do a lot of different things with Hepatra. So you could do a little of -1/-1, a little bit of bounty, a little bit of +1/+1.
Cleopatra.
I keep saying Hepatra.
Well, it's because they're so close.
I just love Hepatra.
And Hepatra is so obviously meant to represent Cleopatra.
Yes, right.
That I get it.
Yeah.
And it's not the only card. Like, we're going to talk about a card later that we've also had a magic version of.
Yes.
So like Hepatra, Cleopatra, and the fact that they work so well together is so nice.
It's
so
cool.
clean.
I like that they get to be in the same deck. I think Cleopatra is very cool.
I like it a lot.
For a more controlling deck, it's pretty neat.
Yeah. Next, you just wanted to generally talk about one of the new mechanics of the set.
Let's talk about free running.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just read this mechanic for you very quickly. This says, you may cast this spell for its free running cost if you dealt combat damage to a player this turn with an assassin or a commander. Okay, so a lot of these they're sort of like, what's the rogue? Like Prowl.
Yeah.
But your commander is the rogue.
Yeah.
So obviously, if you're playing assassins, this is probably good. But if you have a commander that is designed to deal combat damage, especially to deal combat damage early, these are very powerful effects. Right. Like if you're playing Basim.
Yeah. Well, he's an assassin and a commander, but let's pretend he was an assassin. It would be fantastic still.
Yeah. I mean, it's a 2-mana commander that comes down, makes itself unblockable, connects, and then discounts the spell.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them. If your commander is built to do that, if you have like a Yuriko deck where you just know your commander is hitting, then you should look at all of the free running cards, honestly. We're going to talk about the ones that we think are either the most powerful or sort of the hardest to evaluate.
Yeah. I feel like all of these are more open to be generically good if you're going in that direction, because a lot of them are like assassins or like very tied to mechanics in this set. Right. These ones that we picked out are going to be useful in more decks than just Assassin's Creed decks, I think.
Let's talk about this first one. It's most generic.
Yeah, so this first one is Eagle Vision. Classic ability that you have throughout all of the games. It's 4 and a blue for sorcery, draw 3 cards. 5 mana, draw 3 is not really where you want to be.
That's sorcery speed?
No, certainly not. But it has free running for only 1 in a blue. So 2 mana, draw 3 is very good.
Right. That is an aggressive rate.
That's better than Chart a Course, which was already good. 2 mana, draw 2 when you swung. Mm-hmm. This is, if you can reliably hit with your commander, 2 for 3 is crazy.
This card is very powerful. If you're playing a Basim deck, if you have a 2 mana commander that is always attacking as soon as possible, this is going to feel incredible. And it's actually like a very natural play progression. You're like, all right, I have my commander on board. I'm attacking. I'm dealing combat damage. I'm doing the things my deck wants to do, but I need to refill my hand in case something happens. Yep. Because now I'm already rolling. I can spend some time rebuilding. So I do like that Eagle Vision really fits well into how we would naturally play a commander game.
And because it's so cheap, you can pay 2, draw 3, and leave up interaction.
Yeah.
You can protect your thing.
So you stay ahead.
Yeah.
Or you stay in that position where your commander can keep dealing combat damage.
This next one is interesting. Again, a classic mechanic of the games, the viewpoint synchronization is how you unlock your map. You have that classic like panorama where you're going to see the area. There's the eagle flying around, 4 and a green. They really like 5 mana for these, apparently. Sorcery, free running, 2 and a green. Search your library for up to 3 basic land cards and reveal them. Put 2 of them into the battlefield tapped, and the other goes into your hand, then shuffle. So 3...
Super explosive vegetation.
Yeah, 3 mana, ramp 2, and you get a land for next turn.
It's a Kodama's Vegetation.
Mm-hmm. And if you, for 5, you're like, eh. But for 3, that's good.
It's very powerful for 3 mana. You get 2 lands into play, and you draw an additional land. The weird thing about this... is I have my commander in play.
Yep.
I can successfully deal combat damage.
You sure can.
And now I'm ramping?
Right. What does that deck look like? Because a lot of times you're like, I have ramp intentionally so that I can guarantee my commander a little bit earlier.
Right.
This says you already have your commander in play, or you're doing this weird changeling thing.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, these are interesting in changeling decks.
Yeah, but we'll say, you already have your commander in play because you need it to hit to get to the free running ability.
Right.
And now I'm ramping.
Right.
So... what are you ramping to?
What's the point?
There's a deck out there, and I'm sure some of you have it. I don't have any of those.
Yeah. It's a little bizarre for me. Yeah. It's not typical in Commander that once you have your commander on board and you're doing the thing, now I want to develop my mana base.
Yeah.
It's just going to feel a little out of order. So this isn't my favorite of these, but if you're like, I have a cheap commander that gets me to the more expensive spells, then maybe you look at viewpoint synchronization.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I don't even know. I'm just trying to think maybe Edric, Spymaster of Trest, he doesn't have evasion, but theoretically he's something you play early and you're wrapping into extra turn spells. Something that looks like that, where it's early commander that wants to ramp into big things.
Right.
I'm not sure what it is, but it probably exists.
It's a little weird. There's definitely decks where this is going to be great, and I think there are a lot more where this is going to feel very bad and expensive.
Yeah. But for you guys, I'm happy for you, whoever you are that have that deck. This one I think is awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's just awesome in every case. Overpowering attack, 3 red for sorcery. Untap all creatures you control that attack this turn. If it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase, followed by an additional main phase. And the free running is only 2 in a red.
Okay.
So 5 mana for an extra combat is 1 above the rate that we want to be spending
Right.
for that. Which
like usually 4 or 5.
it's usually, yeah. And then 3 is below that rate.
Right.
So honestly, like if you have to run this, if I have to play this on 3, I'm probably happy anyways. Like I'm not like, oh, this is the best thing ever, but I'm like, I'll pay that. Sure, I'll do it for an extra combat where I might win the game or get an absurd advantage or do something. But then when you can do it for 3 and follow it up with something else, like that's going to feel so good.
I think something people don't think about in Commander enough is that extra combat decks are extra turn decks.
Yes.
It's about taking as many, like maximizing the amount of phases you have, right?
Yep.
And you don't get the additional mana, you don't get the additional card, of course, but you're still trying to compress the amount of game actions that you do into a tight space.
Yeah.
So being able to pay 3 mana for that
Yeah.
is so powerful, and it matches the kind of play pattern that you want, right? Your commander's on board, you're connecting, you're moving forward, and now you want to maximize this space that you're in where you're already ahead, so you can slam this, take another extra combat while you're ahead,
Right.
and while you can connect.
Right.
And then you have additional mana for interaction or to further your board or to protect your board. This makes a lot of sense versus the ramp one, which is sort of like, why
when
is
am I playing this?
What I'm doing right now?
Yeah, like this one, overpowering attack is going straight into my Tovolar deck because that one's all about dealing combat damage, drawing as many cards as possible, being aggressive with your commander.
Oh, yeah.
And being able in the early game when you have that attack, leveraging it into another combat to draw even more cards and then being able to leave up a green protection piece is going to be very, very good. And I think you nailed it in that fact that it will feel like, and it is, essentially an extra turn for those type of decks.
Yeah.
And for 3 mana,
That's a huge swing. Yeah, your opponents go, oh no. There's one more I wanted to talk about, and this one's sort of the most interesting.
Yes.
Escape detection. 1 blue for an instant. Which is weird. The rest are sorceries.
They're all the others are sorceries. Many of them are creatures. There's only a couple that are like this.
Yeah. 1 blue for an instant. It says return target creature to its owner's hand, draw a card, and then free running, return a blue creature you control to its owner's hand. So if you pay the free running cost, you can bounce one of your own creatures to not pay any mana cost for this. So you return a creature to your hand, you return a creature to an opponent's hand, and you draw a card.
Yeah.
I just hit with my commander.
Right. So you don't have to get a blocker out of the way or anything like that.
And now is the moment that I want to return a creature to their hand after I've attacked.
You've hit.
I've already successfully hit, and they can deploy it
on their turn.
On their turn when they untap.
And it's weird because it's an instant. So you're like, great, I can leave this up for my opponents. But what that means is you will never get the free running because free running specifies combat damage from your commander or an assassin. It doesn't say damage.
Yeah.
So if you want to get the free running, like technically, yes, it's still an instant, but you will never get it at that instant speed. Like, oh, they're attacking me with this thing and I wasn't expecting it, or they put down this really powerful piece. I'm going to bounce it back to their hand and essentially negate their turn or do something crazy like that. You will never do that with the free running.
The only reason I could see casting this for its free running cost is if returning a creature to your hand is an upside for you.
Right, like ninjas.
Like
we just mentioned Yuriko.
Absolutely. It's great in a ninja deck. It's great in like an ETB type of thing where you're like, it's Yuriko, but I'm going to bounce a Baleful Strix, replay the Baleful Strix, draw a card, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even then, just doing the tempo hit of your opponent returning a creature to their hand is just like slow them down a little bit, and I get a little bit of value out of it as well.
That's the thing too. So the other thing that bounce sometimes is good for is protecting your pieces.
Right.
Your opponents are going to have wanted to remove your thing before you hit them.
Yeah.
Meaning it is also not a protection piece.
No. Unless you pay 3 mana.
Unless you pay full price.
Right.
So it's like, I don't know, again, other than ninjas or a couple very niche specific strategies, I don't know when that free running is really an upside. And 3 to bounce one thing it's even specifies creature, it's not non-land permanent, is a way too high of a rate, even tacking on the card draw.
It's interesting. I think if you think about this as a 3-mana bounce a creature draw card, we don't play that, right? No. Repulse is 3-mana bounce a creature draw card.
Yeah.
It's okay in Commander, 3-mana bounce a creature draw card, but that's a lot to hold up.
Yep. And it's it's only creature.
Yeah.
Like if it were
I would rather play like not Free from the Rail, Into the Royal.
Yeah.
Similar rhythm.
Yeah.
Which is like 2 mana to bounce I believe it's a non-land permanent, or 4 mana to bounce a permanent draw card.
Yeah, that's Into the Royal and the other one, the Blink of an Eye or something like that.
Blink of an Eye sounds right.
Yeah, at 3, I would almost consider it because Into the Royal or Blink of an Eye will cost you 4 for bounce and draw. This would be 1 less to bounce and draw a non-land permanent. But it's not that. It specifies creature, which makes it a lot worse.
You're only running this if you care about the free running cost, I think, and the free running cost is extremely narrow. So I think don't be dazzled by the free running cost. It's a little awkward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Up next is the man himself.
I am so excited for this.
man himself.
One of the men.
I don't know if he's the man, I suppose.
The man is probably Ezio, because he was like the face of the Assassin's Creed franchise for so long. He got a whole trilogy.
Right.
And he is like, players think of like Assassin's Creed, Ezio is like the face. He's Edward Kenway, who we're about to talk about, is probably the number 2. Okay. He is a wildly popular protagonist. Came out in Black Flag, a very popular game, and it's such a cool and unique character and a very different take on what an Assassin's Creed protagonist is, because Ezio was very like, Ezio was a little bit like, he was like charismatic and cool in that way, but he was also very devoted and very serious and all in on the Assassin's Creed, on being an assassin. The next game after that, after his trilogy, was Assassin's Creed 3. That game was good. It was more of a serious character. It was different. But then we had Black Flag, and the interesting thing about Edward Kenway was, through most of the game, he's not an assassin. He's just a pirate. And he's
Pirate's Creed.
Yeah, it's
more like guidelines.
It's more of a guideline than a set of rules. He's really just after his own goals. And throughout the course of the game, you see him come to realize that like he reaches his end goal. He has all this money. He's super successful, but his life is empty. And he ends up joining the assassins later, after other characters are like, dude, you suck. You
need a hobby.
You need to like do something more with your life, because like you can't just do this forever. And then he really has a meaningful turnaround and like starts doing things for others and doesn't always put himself first. Like at one point his like crew mutinies him because he's just after whatever's best for him at any given time. And so anyways, he's just such a sick character. Like the whole game is just, you're just a pirate simulator. But then seeing the development of this character who doesn't believe in the assassins, who's just like, why would I tie myself down by these tenets that don't mean anything to me?
He's Han Solo.
He is a lot like Han Solo. And then he has that turnaround where he fights for something that's
he's like actually a Jedi, okay.
Yeah, he's actually Han Solo, you're right. Anyways.
Han Solo rules.
Han Solo does rule.
Let's meet him.
So does Edward Kenway. So, Captain Kenway. He's Welsh, he's not British. He will make sure to tell you that anytime. So people call him British. He's like, no, I'm Welsh. So he's 2, a blue, a black, and a red. Grix is so perfect. I'm so glad they didn't put white in his color identity. He's a legendary creature, human assassin pirate. He's a 5/5. Oh, that's the other thing. He gets his robes because he actually kills an assassin and takes his clothes after a shipwreck. It's awesome. Okay. At the beginning of your end step, you create a treasure token for each tapped assassin, pirate, and or vehicle you control.
Okay.
He just cares about all of it.
Yeah.
And whenever a vehicle you control deals combat damage to a player, you look at the top card of that player's library and exile it face down. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled. Importantly, he is not tied to that card in any way, so you still have access to it even if you lose him.
Right.
And then I love the fact that like you use your pirates or your assassins to crew your vehicles. They're tapped now. You attack with the vehicle that's now tapped, and you just make a bunch of gold because you're like, we're all working together to
such a
pillage
story.
and plunder.
It's such a story. I mean, you look at it and you're like, all right, there's a lot mechanically going on here, and you're like, nah, it's just assassins and pirates driving pirate ships to get money. That's it.
That's it.
That's the story going on here. So he's a 5-mana 5/5 that draws you your opponent's cards, makes you mana, and has a cool crew. I mean, there's a lot to like here, especially in a popular character.
Yeah. And
it's worth noting that Edward does not fix your mana.
No.
You have to use treasure mana if you don't have the ability to make the mana of the spells you're casting up your opponent's
but he does give you the
library.
treasures, which help a lot.
He does.
And it's also play, so you can play your opponent's lands.
Sure can. There
So,
you go.
Which is just so fitting for him. And we would be remiss to mention Edward and not mention the Jackdaw, his ship, which is 1 a blue and a red for a legendary artifact vehicle. It's a 4/4. Whenever Jackdaw deals combat damage to a player, you may discard your hand. If you do, you draw a card for each artifact you control, which is so nice because he just made you a bunch of tokens.
So powerful.
And then crew 3. And importantly, now you're ready to sail for the Horn, where roll and go. The sea shanties in the game. Like, I have a playlist on my phone that is just the sea shanties from Black Flag, and I also have them all from Rogue. And then I've just added over the years other sea shanties. It's so good. Anyways.
I love how flavorful this feels, and it's sort of the first pirate commander that really includes the ships.
Yes,
right. Like, you can include vehicles in your pirate ships before in your pirate decks.
Beckett Brass deck.
Yeah, but it's for flavor reasons. It's not for mechanical reasons, and this takes advantage of that.
So good. I love it so much.
So I think there's a couple builds of this, and one of them you really focus around the vehicles side of things. You include the Jackdaw and the Indomitable, obviously, and these
Smuggler's
big
Copter,
pirate
every
ships.
other one. Yeah, you know them.
Ideally, you want them cheaper than
Edward.
Edward. I was like Kenway. Jack.
It's okay. You can call it Captain Kenway.
Captain. Sorry. Cheaper than Edward because you want it to come down, then he can crew it, and you can attack with the vehicle right away.
Yep.
Evasion is great, or at least something that is not easy to block.
Yeah.
So Smuggler's Copters can be really good. The Weather Light's can be really good. The Indomitable isn't evasive, but it is a 6/6.
Yeah.
Which
it's
is
hard to block.
huge.
And it recurs itself, too.
Yeah, works well with the pirates. Even the Nautiloid ship is kind of sick in this deck.
Sure, D&D and Assassin's Creed, why not?
When this enters the battlefield, you exile target player's graveyard, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you may put a creature card exiled with Nautiloid ship onto the battlefield under your control. But not to mention, it's a 5/5 with flying and crew 3. So it hits like a Nautiloid ship.
Yeah. This next one, big shout out to my boy Eric Lem.
He loves this card. He talks about it all the time.
He talks this and the Ozolith. He just can't stop talking about both those cards. Mighty Servant of Luco. 3 again, D&D. 3 mana for a artifact vehicle, 6/6 with trample.
Nice.
War to discard a card.
Nice.
Why not? Whenever it becomes crewed for the first time each turn, if it was crewed by exactly 2 creatures, it gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw 2 cards until end of turn. Crew 4. Notably, you can always overcrew. So you could crew this with Edward and something else, and even though Edward technically would have met the requirement by himself, you could guarantee the 2 anytime you want it.
So you can still get that card draw.
Yeah.
This is 6/6 with trample that draws you cards.
It's hard to remove, too.
And it's hard to remove. And people are like, I don't want to spend removal on the Mighty Servant of Luca.
Yeah, I don't want to spend a removal and also a card from my hand.
Yeah, this card's going to feel really, really good, and it's crazy cheap. So I think it's definitely worth looking at in this deck. Card advantage of your own is just as important as drawing off of your opponent's library.
Yeah.
If you go the vehicles route, you probably still want some assassins and some pirates to make sure that you're making maximum treasures and you've got good synergistic bodies to crew those ships. But you could also include, like, Magda Brazen Outlaw is incredible. She likes being tapped. She makes treasures. She utilizes treasures to get a bigger vehicle. Like Fallow Sage is a merfolk that likes being tapped. This build would really focus around the vehicle side of things, I think.
There's a whole bunch of cards with the inspired mechanic where they do something when they untap, and then non-keyworded, they've brought that back several times. And then importantly, again, with Captain Kenway, we can't not talk about Adwale, breaker of chains, his quartermaster. 1, a blue and a black for a legendary creature, human assassin pirate. He's a 4/1. Whenever Auditore enters the battlefield, reveal the top 6 cards of your library. You may put an assassin, a pirate, or vehicle card from among them into your hand, and the rest of the bottom of your library in a random order. That's a whole deck.
Yeah.
That's great. And then whenever a vehicle you control deals combat damage to a player, you may return Auditore from your graveyard to your hand, which is nice. He recurs himself, and he's a 4/1, so he can crew most things, which is fitting because he's, again, such a cool and awesome character throughout the series. He really is like Edward's anchor throughout the whole thing, because Edward is very, again, starts off very selfish, very for himself, and Auditore is the character who's like, you need to be thinking of more things than just whatever your current goal is. And Auditore actually ends up joining up with the assassins before Edward does.
Sure. He's a good influence.
He is a very good influence, and so cool. They both get captured at the very beginning of the game and help each other escape, and they both capture the jackdaw together. And through that, Edward becomes the captain of the ship and asks Auditore what position would be fitting for him. And he tells him, essentially, I would accept no less than quartermaster, which is like the very next person. And then he ended up getting his own DLC in Black Flag, which is so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, can't have can't have Captain Kenway without Auditore.
Very cool. Of course, you could also do a pirates build of this where you're just doing Grixis pirates and you attack with them and then you make a ton of treasures. There's a few decks that look like this. There's a lot of pirates build that cares about treasures. Check out Admiral Beckett Brass will give you an idea of what a very aggressive go-wide pirates deck looks like. And if you want to be more treasure focused, you could look at like Don Andres, who cares more about treasures and pirates.
I voiced him, so
and
that's why
there's a lot of Grixis pirates running around. So check out one of those lists for that build as well.
Yep.
All right, we've got to take a break, but we will be back after a few words from our sponsors.
Bye.
So, I win the game. And cut!
All right, reset, back to 1.
Checking the gate. How do I keep up with everything going on here at the command zone? In my DUER jeans, of course.
Places.
These jeans are so comfortable, I gotta be on the move to show them off right, like this. What are we running from?
Yeah, we'll figure it out in post. Nice jeans.
Nice jeans.
Now, Magic players know the importance of staples, and a good pair of jeans are a staple part of any wardrobe.
Jackets for your next scene.
DUER denim, it's flexible.
Like Soul Ring, it can go anywhere.
Plus, with its breathability and temperature regulation, it's gonna have you feeling fresh.
So you're equipped for anything, from the battlefield to the boardroom.
All right, team. How are those Q4 projections coming along?
Our future positionings feel as comfortable as those jeans.
Mana curves are down, wins are up.
What if we were to leverage our core competencies by synergizing with our point of sale?
Let's run it up the flagpole.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Because here at the command zone, we're not just talkers, we're doers.
Optimize your legs with DUER jeans.
Trust me, you'll be reaching for your DUER jeans again and again. Order yours today. Check out DUER's flagship stores in LA or Denver, or shop online at shopduer.com/command.
Right now, our listeners get 20% off site-wide when you use our exclusive URL, shopduer.com/command.
This is an amazing deal. Don't wait to get 20% off. Go now to shopduer.com/command.
Okay, things are looking dire. We really need to think this out.
All right, if I play Warrior's Instincts against the Scorned Shadow, I'll draw extra cards because it's a combat challenge.
You have to be careful of the Soul Mask trap. It punishes your card draw.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Wait, hold on. Your Fist of the Wind and my Sneak Attack are both better in combat, so maybe that's the line here.
That could work.
Yeah.
Card draw and synergies. This looks cool. Scorn Stockade. What is this?
We just picked it up. It's the new KINFIRE Delve. This is the co-op strategy card game.
Yeah, and it's super fun.
And you can play with 3 people?
Well, Scorned Stockade is 2 players right out of the box, but if you combine it with the previous set, you can play up to 4 players.
Just like Commander.
The rules are really easy to pick up, but the game has a lot of depth. You have to play smart to win.
Just like Magic.
And you face different challenges every single game, so you really gotta adapt on the fly.
Plus, it was only $20.
Wait, I think I got it. If I play Knockout, I can just destroy the mass directly.
Ooh, then I can boost you with a coordinated attack. But is that gonna be enough?
It will be if we get a little lucky.
Okay.
Yay!
Okay. I want in next game.
All right, shuffle this up and draw 5 cards.
Order KINFIRE Delve Scorned Stockade at kinfiredelve.com and use code COMMAND10 at checkout for 10% off. That's a whole lot of game for just $20. Plus, pick up the first set, Vainglory's Grotto, for the full 4-player experience. Again, that's kinfiredelve.com and use code COMMAND10 to score 10% off. And then I'm going to flash out Illusory Ambusher. I will bolt it to draw 3 cards. I will sneak attack out Triskaidekaphile. I'm going to go to my upkeep and I will win the game.
That was your first time playing the deck?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first time in paper. I've already goldfished it like 100 times on ARCHIDEKT. Their playtester is super user-friendly. Playing cards just takes one click, and you can mulligan, tutor, and move through your turns with the press of a key. There are simple menus with counters and copies, and you can take notes on cards as you play them.
ARCHIDEKT is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest commander decks. Just go to archidekt.com/commandzone to get started.
That's ARCHIDEKT.com/commandzone.
Welcome back, everybody. We are talking about the new Assassin's Creed set. We're jumping right back into it with a man of the hour.
The man himself. We had 2 back-to-back.
Yeah. It's because they both start with E.
That's the secret.
Yeah.
if your name starts with E, you're just top of the list.
You're the man.
All right. Ezio, Auditore da Firenze. 1 and a black for a legendary creature, human assassin, 3/2 with menace. Assassin spells you cast have Freerunning, black, which means, again, you can cast it for its Freerunning cost if you've hit with an assassin or your commander. And it has menace, and it's so cheap. And then whenever Ezio deals combat damage to a player, you may pay Wooburg if that player has 10 or less life. When you do, that player loses the game.
Whoa!
To be honest, I don't know how relevant that's going to be, because if you got them below 10, a lot of times you probably could have killed them anyways. Yeah. But the important thing is it makes them 5 colors, which means you finally have Ezio as the 5-color umbrella to put all of your assassins in, which is so fitting, because he's the guy. You know, he brought up the assassins to what it would later become through recruiting, through partnerships, and he's just so cool. He's just fully dedicated, full on the thing. Yeah.
This is exactly what they want you to do with this deck, right?
Yep.
Is you put Ezio in the command zone and you fill the deck with legends from Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of assassins. There's all of the flavorful options you could want that go in this deck. That's why, like, Edward cares about assassins, so he can go in the 99 of this and make treasures with your assassins. This is going to be the deck, the big Assassin's Creed deck.
Yep.
Because of that, it's going to be pretty easy to build yourself.
Yeah.
You just get all the legends you want to put in there, especially the ones that care about assassins and pirates, and you put them in. The higher mana value, the better, because they're better to cheat into play with Ezio.
Yeah, that's a huge cost reduction. 2 mana for basically any of your assassin spells is awesome. And
not to mention, it's only black mana at this point.
Yes.
You've cast your commander for 1 and a black, you've connected, and then you pay black to cast another assassin of any color.
Yeah. It's really good. It's like it's weird. We were talking about this. It's a 5-color mono black deck.
I think genuinely I would build this mana base
as if
very dedicated to mono black. I mean, like, Urborg is going to be incredible in this deck, of course, but I think if most of the deck is black mana and you can take advantage of black's mass mana production, so Cabal Coffers and even Cabal Stronghold, you can dump your hand incredibly fast.
Yeah.
Because if you connect with Ezio and you have 4 black mana on turn 3, you can play 2 more assassins.
Yep.
Just right away. And that's a very, very fast curve. And I think this is an aggressive deck. You want to be front foot. You want to cheat out the biggest assassins you possibly can. And you really want your mana base to be as smooth as possible for a 5-color deck.
Totally.
If you're really focused on that, the Wooburg ability, you can include filter lands. Like I would include like Cascading Cataracts, which is put 5 mana in, tap it, add Wooburg. There's another one that says add 5 mana of any color. Yeah. And they're basically colorless lands that help with the fixing here. But again, this is mostly black, which makes sense for assassins.
Yeah.
We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the assassins. Let's just talk about the ones that are outside the world of Assassin's Creed. I feel like it's going to be very easy to be like...
I agree. Basically, yeah.
You put the fries in.
Yeah, you put all the fries in. You put
the burgers in.
Achille, all of them.
Yeah.
Desmond, sure, because, without Desmond, none of them would be here. It's just like, just all of them. But the interesting thing and the different thing is like, yes, you're going to run all the Assassin's Creed cards, but that's not going to be your whole deck.
Right.
There have been assassins well before this, and some of them are pretty neat. As an example, a very cool commander in her own right, but it can also fit very well into this deck is Queen Marchesa. 1, a red, a white, and a black, but in this case, you're just going to pay black for a 3/3 Death Touch Haste human assassin. Whenever Queen Marchesa enters the battlefield, you become the monarch. Not fitting very well with the Assassin's Creed theme, but that's okay. At the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent is the monarch, you create a 1/1 black assassin creature token with Death Touch and haste.
Perfect.
You're just going to guarantee you're always going to hit the free run with her in play because now you have little Death Touch hasty assassins that trigger free run.
Right.
So that's cool. We already mentioned Mari the Killing Quill. Do you want to talk about this wonderful Warhammer card?
This Warhammer card is 4 blue-black for a human shapeshifter assassin. It's called Calidus Assassin.
Sure, let's go with that.
It has flash. It's a 3/3. You may have Calidus Assassin enter the battlefield tapped as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it has, when this creature enters the battlefield, destroy up to one other target creature with the same name as this creature.
So it's a removal spell.
It's a removal spell, and it's a clone, and it's an assassin, and it's 6 mana. I mean, 2 mana?
2 mana, yeah.
It's a little weird to cast this with free running, of course, because it has flash, so you're losing that value, and it's like you're removing stuff after you've already connected, but that's very efficient to clone and kill something.
Yeah, 2 mana. You would play a 2 mana creature that said ETB, copy something, destroy it.
Yeah.
So, yes, you're not getting like the full flash thing, but you're not paying 6 for it. You're paying 2.
Right.
Which feels really good.
Really, really powerful in this deck. I think we got to talk about Ramses.
Yeah, he was the previous big like assassin commander. Ramses, Assassin Lord, 2 a blue and a black for a legendary creature human assassin. He's a 4/4 with Death Touch. Other assassins you control get +1/+1. That's nice. And then whenever a player loses the game, if they were attacked this turn by an assassin you controlled, you win the game. A couple issues.
There's a couple issues with Ramses as a commander.
Yes, which is everybody is gonna go after you. I feel like
you have Ramses in the command zone. Everybody's like, you're gonna murder one person and we'll all die.
Yeah,
how fun! But in the 99, this is perfect.
Yep.
This is such a good surprise where you're like, like of course. It also pairs really well with Ezio, which I think is cool. It makes that Wooburg ability kind of relevant, right?
Yeah.
If you get somebody down to 10 life, play Wooburg and have Ramses in play.
Yeah, they lose the game and now Ramses says, okay, well, you won. You did it.
So you only have to do 30 damage?
Yeah. It's very cool. It's very good. It's going to feel good whenever you do it. I don't think it's going to happen that often, but when it does, it's going to be cool.
Yeah. In that scenario, you would have to have Ramses in play before combat.
Yes, you would have him in play.
Yeah.
You swing and your opponents are like, oh, I wasn't expecting that.
Right, yeah.
And then you hit, then you pay the Wooburg, and then you're like, well, I just won. Nice and neat.
That's pretty sweet. I mean, as like a 5-color aggressive deck, and you only have to do 30 damage, it's going to...
Feels good.
Like, if you can put that together, it's very, very powerful. But it's in the 99, so it's not going to happen all the time, which means there isn't the same feel bad as if you have Ramses in the command zone.
Right.
There also isn't the same target on your back. We want to talk about Outlaws, too, because they just printed a ton of cards that care about Outlaws in Thunder Junction. And of course, those include assassins.
Yep.
Olivia Opulent Outlaw is an assassin herself, but also says whenever one or more outlaws you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. Great. And then she puts counters on your assassins. Well, your creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sacrificing those treasures. Fits perfectly in the deck. Is going to give you the mana you want and the fixing for your 5-color mono black deck.
Yeah, it is cool that she will help you pay the Wooburg. Another one that I like, the backup commander actually from that precon, a Vihan Goldwaker. He's red, a white, and a black for a legendary creature dwarf warlock. He's 3/3. Other outlaws you control have vigilance and haste. So good when Ezio has been removed at some point in the early game. You can play him and immediately swing with him. And then at the beginning of combat on return, you may have treasures you control become 3/3 construct assassin artifact creatures in addition to the other types until end of turn.
Pretty sweet.
That feels good. The boys are back in town.
The boys indeed.
X, 2 and a black for a sorcery. Return X target outlaw creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Yes! This is exactly what this card should feel like. Back in town's so powerful. If you are building around one of the outlaw types, it's going to feel awesome.
Yep.
Especially in an aggressive deck that your opponents are going to be like, well, I need a board wipe. It's going to be great.
Yeah, it's going to feel like that famous Assassin's Creed Brotherhood trailer where Ezio's doing all this stuff alone, and then he walks up and the crew of assassins walks up behind him going after Cesare Borgia. It's going to feel so good.
A couple other sweet assassins. Massacre Girl is incredible in this deck. predictably. Greywater's Fixer says each outlaw creature card in your graveyard has Encore X, where X is its mana value. This is a 4-mana 4/4 lizard mercenary. So he's not an assassin himself, but it gives your assassins in your graveyard Encore. A little awkward with legendary creatures. It's not quite as good, which if you're building specifically around Assassin's Creed cards, it's going to be a little worse, but it does just mean you can cast a ton of assassins from your graveyard, attack with everything in one big surprise attack. If you can make a ton of mana, again, you're like a mono black big mana type deck. So I think there are still turns where Greywater's Fixer is going to feel pretty good.
And then this one's just cheeky.
Yeah.
Virtus the Veiled. There it is. 2 and a black for legendary creature Azra Assassin. It's a 1/1. Partner with Gorm the Great. Sure, why not? It has Death Touch, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half their life rounded up.
I love doing that.
You're going to get them to 10 so fast.
So fast.
So...
Super aggressive if you can get this down the turn after Ezio's in play. Your opponents are just like,
Yep.
I cast a Signet.
Yep, that's all I have in play. And now you're threatening half my life total.
This is, again, front foot deck. You want a smooth mana base. I would go as mono black as you possibly can, splashing for cards that are very, very powerful, or really using those treasures to try and fix your mana base. I'm curious to see how fast this deck feels, because I could see a world where it curves out perfectly and you're dead on turn 5.
Yeah. It is really cool, the fact that he puts you in just like, okay, you just have to make black mana. You don't have to make Wooburg mana. Just continue to make black mana and I will do the rest for you.
Yeah.
I think that lends itself in ways that are going to be very powerful. I think the big limiting factor currently is the fact that before this Assassin's Creed set and Thunder Junction, there were not a lot of assassins. There were very little. We've now gotten more of that support. It's still not a very... largely represented creature type yet, but over time that will continue to improve, and I think currently that is the limiting factor for this deck, but on paper all of the abilities Ezio has are fantastic.
Yeah, be very cool. Speaking of powerful, this next one is cracked. It's Havi, the Allfather. 3 red, green, white, so 6 mana altogether for a Naya commander. It's a 6/6 god warrior. Havi, the Allfather, has indestructible as long as there are 4 or more historic cards in your graveyard. Doesn't seem that hard. And then it says, whenever Havi or another legendary creature you control dies, return target legendary card with lesser mana value from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped.
Yeah, and this is the other one that I was alluding to earlier, where we already have a magic version of this.
Yeah, it's all ruined.
Yeah, all ruined, because they're both Odin.
Right.
So, Cleopatra, Havi, and Allrund. Unfortunately, Allrund doesn't fit as neatly into Havi like Cleopatra does with Cleopatra, but still.
This card is very powerful.
It's crazy.
So... the first thing I want to talk about is the density. You really, really need a lot of this deck to be historic so that you can fill up your graveyard with either looting spells or a little bit of self-mill and make this commander indestructible when he hits the battlefield.
Right.
Because he's very powerful and he's 6 mana.
And yeah.
You need to have the protection built in by the time it's time for Havi to arrive.
Your opponents are going to want to remove him. And so having that indestructible is so important, but also, honestly, pretty easy.
4 historic permanents in your graveyard is not that hard. With a little bit of self-mill, you're in red, you can do discard a card, draw 2s. We'll get you there if you don't want to spend a couple of slots on self-mill, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Let's talk about lands. There's a ton of historic lands, legendary lands, artifact lands. I do think this deck wants all of them.
Yeah.
Wayfarer's Bauble is a great little historic permanent just to put in your graveyard, ramp you in the early game, fix you for these 3-color commander. There's 6 artifact lands now in Naya.
Yeah, you have Great Furnace, Ancient Den, Tree of Tales, and then the tapped dual ones, Slagwoods Bridge, Thornglint Bridge, and Rustvale Bridge.
Yeah.
Which gives you a lot.
Yeah. I think this deck is, you look at those and you're like, it's a tap mana or the whatever. I think this deck is a little slow, but once Havi's on the board, it just pops off. So early game, you're building, you're ramping, you're setting up these, like, getting historic permanents in your graveyard, and then Havi comes and you can do crazy sacrifice loops and...
Right.
But let's fill up that graveyard first, ideally using historic permanents. I like legendary creatures here as much as possible because they work with Havi later in the game as well.
Yeah, so the first one you have here is Shigeki Jukai Visionary. 1 in a green for a legendary enchantment creature, Snake Druid, 1/3, barely fit on the text box there. It has a 1 in a green tap. Return Shigeki to its owner's hand. Reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped. Put the rest into your graveyard. You're filling your graveyard. It's nice. And then it has channel XX green. Discard it. Return X target non-legendary cards from your graveyard to your hand. Either way, if you pitch him, that's now a historic thing that's in your graveyard for Havi. Or if you played him, you've now milled some cards. Theoretically, some of them are going to be historic, so you field your Havi. And then you can still channel him later to, again, add another card into your graveyard.
It's going to be a great early game card. And in the late game, you can channel it to get back some important creature pieces or just put another historic permanent in your graveyard, even at instant speed.
That's good.
6 is great in this deck as well from Modern Horizons 3.
Yeah, new one.
When it attacks, you mill 3 cards, and you may put a land card from among them into your hand. As long as it's your turn, non-land permanent cards in your graveyard have retrace. It mills, it draws lands, it's historic, and it gives you the recursion in the late game to replay important combo pieces and just be in the graveyard.
It also takes aggro away from you. It's a 3-mana 2/4 with reach.
I know.
It's so hard to get through.
This card's pretty absurd. And it's going to be great in this deck. Again, self-mill and historic is the big checkbox here.
Chef's kiss. Next one we have here is Vorinclex, just straight Vorinclex.
Yeah.
From March of the Machine. 3 green for a legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor, 6/6 with trample and reach. When it enters the battlefield, you search your library for up to 2 forest cards, reveal them, put in your hand, then shuffle. For 6 green, you exile him, then return to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. You do the sorcery. It's the Grand Evolution. Its first mode is mill 10 cards. Put up to 2 creature cards from among the milled cards onto the battlefield. The second mode is distribute 7+1+ counters among any number of target creatures you control. The last one is until end of turn, creatures you control gain 1. This creature fights target creature you don't control. The important thing is the first one, mill 10 is a lot.
Mill 10's a lot. So I know we're going to look at Vorinclex and be like, that's not a way to set up for your commander. But Vorinclex is just going to feel good. You want to be ramping in the early game. You play Vorinclex. You draw 2 cards. He's a 6/6 with trample and reach that just chills. He's easy to reanimate if Havi dies.
Yep.
It just does a lot of the things that the deck wants to do. And drawing those 2 forests goes a long way when your commander is 6 mana.
Yes.
This card has impressed me. It looks like a little bit overcosted, but it's a threat that draws cards and is a late game plan all on its own.
It's also fixing because they're forest cards, not basic forests.
Yeah.
So you can go get, if you needed red, you can go get that tool.
Yeah.
Or you can go get that Triome, Yeah. So that's kind of cool.
I like this card, and I also like that he's undercosted, which is good for this deck. Sure. This next piece of mill is also a little, you don't think of it as mill, but you don't need a ton of self-mill in this deck. No. You just need some in your graveyard. It's Monster Manual, but specifically the adventure spells Zoological Study.
Good job.
We did it. Zoological Study. 2 to green for a sorcery. Mill 5 cards, then return a creature card milled this way to your hand. And then it is an artifact that says 1 in a green, tap. You may put a creature card from your hand onto the battlefield.
Yep.
So mill some, cheats a big thing into play, and helps get that chain going without investing even more mana in it.
And since it's an artifact, it's historic.
It's historic.
It's nice.
It's almost like we planned that. But let's get into the legendary creatures because that's really the meat and potatoes of the Havi deck. Starting with...
Right off the bat.
Doozy.
Safi Eriksdotter. Green and a white for a legendary creature, human scout. It's a 2/2. Sacrifice Safi Eriksdotter. I can do it. When target creature is put into your graveyard this turn, return that card to the battlefield.
Okay.
So here's the thing. It can go infinite.
Yeah, what?
Safi?
She's never done that.
Never. Not once, not now, not ever.
She's a good girl. Yeah, it goes infinite with this card for sure, with your commander.
Yeah.
If you sacrifice a legendary creature that has a higher mana value than Safi, Well, you sacrifice Safi first. Sacrifice it, target the legendary creature. Sacrifice the legendary creature you just targeted. It dies, brings back Safi. Safi brings back the original creature.
And do it again and again and again and again and again.
As long as you have a free sacrifice outlet, you're in business.
It's not hard to do. And so many colorless ways to do that. And
so many historic ways
ways to do that. It's a very easy infinite combo to have in your deck. Just be aware of it. Both when you have the deck, people are going to treat you like you have the combo in your deck. And when you're playing against it, they probably have the combo in their deck. So you're going to have to go after them.
Yeah, this is this kind of loop-de-doop-de deck, which we've seen kind of like Samwise Gamgee does a similar thing. It sacks foods to bring back historic permanents. Tishar does similar things. Again, bringing back creatures when you cast historic permanents.
Yep.
All of these work very well together. Yep. I think Havi works particularly well with legends that have sacrifice abilities like Safi's.
Yeah.
Like Boromir of the, what's his name? Warden of the Tower, sacrifices to give your board indestructible.
Yeah, it protects the Havi even more, even though it already had indestructible probably.
Right. And then when it dies, it brings back a smaller thing like a Safi or like a Hajar, Loyal Bodyguard, which sacrifices to make your board indestructible. This is going to be a very difficult deck to deal with.
It's very resilient.
Yeah. And it's going to have the sack outlet. So if you go to exile stuff, you should be able to sacrifice it in response, put it in your graveyard, bring back something else. Once Havi's on the board, this deck is going to be fully online and is going to have a lot of that. When this dies, I bring this back and it has an ETB trigger and I'll sacrifice it to bring this back and that will... It's a lot of those type of things. I think like Gerard, Weatherlight Hero, is incredible in this deck.
Yeah. It's 2, a red and a white for a legendary creature, human soldier, 3/3 with first strike. Whenever a Gerard Weatherlight Hero dies, exile it and return to the battlefield artifact and creature cards in your graveyard that were put there from the battlefield this turn.
You stack all your stuff, you recur everything in your graveyard, you sacrifice Gerard, you bring back everything that you sacrificed. And now your whole, it's a nigh living death if you have a sack outlet on the board.
Yeah. There's also AO, the Dawn Sky.
Dies triggers.
Yeah. 3 white, 5/4 flying vigilance. When it dies, choose one. Look at the top 7 cards of your library, putting a number of non-land permanent cards with total mana value 4 or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Or put 2 +1/+1 counters on each permanent you control that's a creature or vehicle. So that gives you a little overrun or fuels your board even more to do even more of the shenanigans. It's basically like you want ETB, sack, things that sacrifice themselves, and death triggers.
Yeah.
And it's like if you have
ETBs.
some combination of those 3 things, you're gonna be feeling pretty good.
You're gonna be in business. Of course, if your deck is full of legendary creatures, you're gonna want that support as well.
Yep.
Reki, the History of Kamigawa, will draw cards when you cast legendaries. Gandalf the White doubles your
triggers.
It doubles your dies triggers. It's entering or leaving the battlefield, so it'll double both AO's death triggers and like Torsten's ETB triggers.
And unless you play at instant speed.
It's
crazy.
It triggers, it doubles the Havi dies trigger, so you can reanimate multiple things. The more you can get in your graveyard, the more stuff that sacrifices themselves or loots, the more powerful this is going to be. And like we said, free sack outlets are the name of the game for making sure you're in control of when your creatures die and enter. So Altar of Dementia is going to be the most powerful because you can mill yourself and it's free and it's historic.
And then eventually you just start milling them.
Yep, and it's a win con. Birthing Pod is a tutor that's also a sack outlet, so it can get you into the more important pieces. Phyrexian Altar, Astronaut's Altar, all of those are just going to keep you churning.
Yeah.
Havi is a very, very powerful legendary build, and I think it'll be very fun to play, but don't underestimate the amount of time it will take up and how powerful it is.
Yeah, it's definitely a deck that lends itself very well to goldfishing. Definitely check out our goldfishing video to learn how to do that, because it is going to be very decision intensive. It's going to take a lot of time. And so in order to do that efficiently and not spend so much time of the game where everybody's just watching you do the thing, really go through the deck, know the nitty gritty of how it works so that you can more quickly go through it.
Yeah. Leonardo Da Vinci.
The man himself.
2 and a blue for a 3/3 human artificer. He's got 2 activated abilities, 3 blue until end of turn. Thopters you control have base power and toughness XX, where X is the number of cards in your hand. And then 2 and a blue tap. Draw a card, then discard a card. If the discarded card was an artifact card, exile it from your graveyard. If you do create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 0/2 Thopter artifact creature with flying in addition to its other types. I love this card.
It's very, very powerful, very cheeky.
And you're turning some big, scary, biggest of all time terrifying artifacts
into little O2
Thopters.
Thopters. Yeah.
What an inventor he is.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what Thopters we're going to make with this deck. There's a couple of really powerful things you can do, especially with the big ones that come in with counters on them.
Yeah.
Early threats.
This first one we have is threefold Thunderhulk. 7 mana for an artifact creature gnome. You don't care about that. But it enters with 3+1/+1 counters on it. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you create a number of 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens equal to its power. And you can pay 2, sack another artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on the threefold Thunderhulk. So it will come in as a 3/5 flyer and then be able to, when it enters, it'll make 3 gnomes. And then on the attacks, it'll make more
3
gnomes.
more. Oh my God.
Yeah.
What a Thopter that is.
It's quite the powerful Thopter
That's
that
so
Leonardo has
scary.
invented there.
Hexavist does a similar thing. It comes in with 6 +1/+1 counters. You can give Leo flying, give him a ride on this Hexavist Thopter.
Sure, why not? I mean, he created the flying machine in the game, so it's just like that.
Exactly. A Hexavist for the rest of us.
I feel like the one that people immediately thought of and talked about was Portal to Phyrexia, 9 mana artifact. It ETBs. Each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, you may put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under control. It's a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. Crazy good. You don't really benefit from cheating it out super early like you do with many of the other ones for Leonardo, but it is still great to just 3 mana you get a Portal to Phyrexia.
Yeah, I mean, this is just really, really powerful interaction, especially if you can start making additional copies of it. But anytime you can get a portal onto the board, it's very, very powerful, especially if it's a big scary portal, but it's like a little mouth of a Thopter that's just like, bah!
And I'm so glad
Phyrexia's in there.
that they gave us the Thopter tokens for it too. It's so good. Those are the main set, and they're so beautiful.
One I really like to turn into a Thopter is Darksteel Monolith.
Sure.
This is an 8 mana indestructible artifact that says once each turn you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a colorless spell you cast from your hand. This deck is going to be full of big, powerful, colorless spells. And if you can make a Thopter that's an indestructible blocker that lets you cast those for free, that's so powerful.
Yeah, it's really good. It's going to feel crazy broken because that card is balanced at 8 for a reason.
Oh, wait, we got to mention him.
This one is so funny. Graz Unstoppable Juggernaut, 8 mana for a 7/5 legendary artifact creature Juggernaut. Juggernauts you control attack each combat if able. Juggernauts you control can't be blocked by walls, because why would they be? And other creatures you control have base power and toughness 5/3 and are Juggernauts in addition to other types. Nice thing is Leonardo's ability is a tap ability, so you won't have to swing with him and risk him in combat. Now your Thopters that were little tiny O2s are now 5/3 Juggernauts. It's so good. And they
It's
still
like I've got a new
flying.
design.
Yeah.
They're a little bigger.
It's a flying tank. Thoughts?
Graz is so incredible in this deck because you're just going to slam Haymaker after Haymaker, and that 0/2 base is going to prevent you from being able to close the game. But if Graz can make them a little bigger, that's going to be pretty sweet.
Such a good little win con.
There's a lot of really neat tricks you can do with this deck. Anytime you can make a copy of an artifact, that's really good. But Cyberman Squadron allows you to make a lot of copies of a lot of artifacts, as long as you're not super focused on the legendary artifacts, because it says non-legendary artifacts you control have myriad.
So good. That's going to feel crazy powerful.
Right?
You get a portal to Phyrexia, and now you get 3 of them every time you attack with one. There's just nothing your opponents can do about that.
You're not supposed to be able to give a portal myriad.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then you also had here March of Progress, 3 mana. You choose target artifact creature you control. For each creature chosen this way, you create a token that's a copy of it, and you can overload it for 7. You just double your board. It's crazy.
There's a couple of cards that care about the mana value of historic permanents you control or artifacts you control. And those are all going to be really good to look at for this deck because they're going to have high mana value permanents that only cost you 3 mana to put onto the battlefield. So stuff like Simulacrum Synthesizer, which cares about big artifacts entering the battlefield, is great because this is a copy of a big artifact. So it has the mana value of the card you're making a copy of. Padim, Console of Innovation, similarly cares about your big mana value artifacts on the board. And it doesn't care that they're token copies because they have the mana value.
They retain their mana value. And there's no way your opponents are going to be able to compete with that mana value. It's a reliable card draw. And then there's just generally stuff that works well when your commander has sort of expensive abilities. You have Training Grounds to reduce the cost by 2. It turns it just a blue and tap.
That's awesome.
You have Omen Hawker. It taps for a colorless and a blue, but you can spend it only to activate abilities. Enigma Jewel, similar thing. It's essentially a soul ring, but can only be used for abilities. And other stuff like that. It's just going to be a very neat little package that's going to make Leonardo even more powerful.
Most of this deck is going to be protecting Leonardo, protecting your tokens, and the giant haymakers to be teeny little thopters. This deck's sweet. You can put some really, really powerful things onto the board very early, so you may attract a lot of attention. Maybe pay attention to which artifacts you're deploying early. Something like a Camille, the Inner Sun, that like discovers at the end of your turn is a great value thopter that maybe your opponents don't prioritize getting rid of. Whereas something like the one that makes all the gnomes, the Threefold Thunderhulk, your opponents are going to be like bang bong, bang bong, bang, like it kill Leo and everything he stands for. Very cool deck. Feels very Leonardo.
Yeah, very fitting. It's perfect for like essentially Ezio's best friend.
Yeah.
It's just they nailed it.
We're not focused around the first ability of it as much. You're going to have cards in your hand. You're going to have powerful stuff on the board. If you need to use it, you can.
Yeah, it's a nice little like kind of overrunny effect. It'll help you like close out the game. Main thing I really like about this is the fact that it's a mono blue deck that isn't just like control.
Yes.
It's a different direction, and I enjoy that a lot. So...
Up next is one of my favorite cards in the set. It's a bird.
It is a bird.
Go
and you love birds, as everybody knows.
This is Senu, Keen-Eyed Protector. 1 and a white for a legendary bird scout. It's a 2/1 with flying and vigilance. It taps and you exile it. You gain 2 life and scry 2. And then it says whenever a legendary creature you control attacks and isn't blocked, if Senu is exiled, put it onto the battlefield attacking. Not tapped and attacking. Just attacking.
Yeah, well, he has vigilance, and it remembers that when it comes right back in. It's very cool. So we overlooked this card at first.
Yeah.
And then you later were like, wait a minute. You could just bring it back. It doesn't have to be from exile from its ability. It just says, was I in exile, I come back. So you can pitch it to a Solitude. You can pitch it to a March of Otherworldly Light. Any of those that let you exile a card from your hand for some cost, even like a Gemstone Caverns. You could pitch it and not take any card loss.
Right.
Because as long as you can attack with a legendary creature that isn't blocked, it will come back. So if your commander is evasive in any way, or you're just running a lot of legendary creatures, which we often are, he just keeps coming back. And it's so impossible for your opponents to remove it. Because if they path it, it's sitting in exile, it will come back.
Yeah.
You know, if they swords it, anything like that, any exile removal, it's coming back. And why would you use it on a 2-mana 2/1 flyer?
Because it keeps gaining you life and scrying.
Because it keeps gaining life and scrying. And on top of that, if it's not summoning sick, and they go to remove it or board wipe happens, you just hide it away in exile, use the gain 2 life and scry 2, and then it will come right back and it peck them for another 2. They have such a short window to deal with it. And you're in white, and it's a tiny creature. White is so good at recurring permanents, especially little guys. So like...
And if it's in, like, usually white's like, oh, you exiled it. Oh, no.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, you exiled it. That's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
He'll be
He
back.
likes it there, honestly. So, yeah, it's just such a neat little card. I'm going to put it in a ton of decks. I really want to try it out because it just seems so efficient. Like many of you guys saw the extra turns where I played Raynar. This just seems so good.
It's so
because
busted
it
in
puts
Raynar.
itself in exile, which Raynar is trying to do anyways, and then it brings itself back. So like, I'm so excited for this.
This bird's awesome and can do some really, really neat tricks. I'm curious to see how you build this as a commander. I think it's a little tricky. It's basically like mono white legends, I guess.
Yeah.
But in the 99 of a legendary deck, this bird is going to feel so good.
Yeah, you're just going to end up with so much incidental life gain. It's sick. Next we have here is Sigurd, Jarl of Ravensthorpe. Nice.
Speaking of ravens.
Speaking of ravens, red, green, and a white for legendary creature human warrior, 3/3. Notably not an assassin. Very fitting because he's not. He has vigilance, trample, and lifelink. Great.
Sure.
Boast 1. Put a lore counter on target saga you control or remove one from it. And whenever a lore counter on a saga, whenever you put a lore counter on a saga you control, put a +1/+1 counter on up to one other target creature.
Okay. So, reminder, boast abilities can only be activated if this creature has attacked and once. So it can be in combat, it can be after combat, but only once. And then he can't buff himself. And he is just a 3/3 on the ground. He's got a lot of keywords, none of them particularly evasive.
Yeah.
So you do have to kind of find a way to either make him bigger or make him difficult to kill.
It is interesting that they gave him such combat-oriented abilities, but not the ability to pump himself with having lifelink and trample. It makes you really think about what sagas you're going to put in.
Right.
As example, one that you thought of right away. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. So sagas are always a little bit flavor to taste, but this is a very aggressive saga deck. Right. So I was looking for sagas that cared about buffing a creature or cared about attacking. And the first Eroan games is one of my favorites, particularly because it's a long saga. It's 2 and a green. The first chapter is create a 1/1 human. Second chapter is put 3 +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. Great. Chapter 3 is if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw 2 cards. And chapter 4 is create a gold token. Plus, this is 3 mana. So turn 3, or maybe even turn 2, depending on if you played a mana creature on turn 1. Turn 3, you play Sigurd. And then right after that, you play the first Eroan games. You make a human, attack with Sigurd, boast to put 3 +1/+1 counters on Sigurd. Now he's attacking as a 6/6 with vigilance, trample, and lifelink. And then you can the next turn, you draw 2 cards. And you can either remove a counter from this, so you can just keep drawing 2 cards over and over again, or you can go forward.
I guess it gives you the mana back. It doesn't really, but I think you would go back.
I think you go back.
Because you can keep drawing 2 every turn is really good.
You just keep backing up, and meanwhile you have a 6/6 with vigilance, trample, and lifelink, and that's on turn 3, 4.
Yeah, and that one you made can hold the counters that he's granting, because he really wants to grant those counters, and it can't be to himself. The fact that this gives you the token and pump on that same turn is really good.
It's such a great combo that's exactly the kind of sagas that you're looking for. 3 mana, combat oriented, makes a body so you can wear those counters, or just has a very powerful effect that you want to repeat over and over again.
Yep.
Because the other play pattern with Sigurd is you play it on 3, you attack with Sigurd, remove the counter from it, and keep redoing a powerful first chapter, like a Princess Takes Flight.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. It's 3 mana for a saga. The first mode is exile up to 1 target creature. The second mode is target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains flying until end of turn. And the third mode is you return the exile card to the battlefield under its owner's control. But if you can just keep going back and you just keep removing things one after the other, it's removing blockers. So you're going to be able to keep pecking in for that 3 lifelink damage and keep exiling things. And then if you do ever get to the 2, it pumps them and gives them evasion. But yeah, just being able to consistently exile something every turn and never get to the third mode where they get the things back.
So cracked.
Very powerful.
It's so cracked. Anything that you can just stay on that first chapter is so good. I was laughing at Of Herbs and Stewed Rabbit, which is the chapter 1, you put a counter on up to 1 target creature, make a food. Perfect. Chapter 2, draw a card, create a food. Perfect. Chapter 3, create a 1/1 white halfling creature token for each food you control. If you use Sigurd and Of Herbs and Stewed Rabbit, you keep putting counters on him and making food and making food and making food and making food. And eventually they're going to remove your commander. And then you just get to the final one and make like 7 hobbits.
So many
out of
halflings.
Nowhere.
It's so cool.
I love this card in here. And it fits the play pattern. So when you're selecting sagas, you probably need like 15, maybe as many as 18, probably no more than that. But you want stuff that's good to repeat and has a little bit of help in combat for your commander.
Yeah. Something that I'm really excited for is we finally have a use for Birgie's second ability.
Yeah.
So Birgie is 2 and a red for 3/3 legendary creature god. Whenever you cast a spell, add red until until end of turn. You don't lose it. Blah. Creatures you control can boast twice during each of your turns rather than once.
We're boasting twice.
up until now has just been flavor text, really. And now it is actually relevant because his boast ability is worth it.
Yes.
Being able to go up and then go back or go back twice or go up twice is going to be really powerful. And you can play the Saga after Birgi. She gives you the mana to pay for the boast because you don't lose it as you move between turns.
Yes.
It's awesome.
She's so good in this deck. She's finally telling stories. Can you imagine?
I know. This whole time
the
she's
god
just
of
been
storytelling.
Yeah, it's actually telling sagas. This whole time she's just been slinging spells, and she's like, I don't care about these. Let me tell you a cool story.
She's like, and a 1-drop, and a 1-drop, and a 1-drop,
Not
and
an
a 1-drop,
interesting story.
and a 1-drop. And now she's here. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about Saga type of decks. There's been a lot of powerful Saga commanders in the last year and a half. There was a bunch that came out in Doctor Who. Ian Chesterton is a big one. But we're not going to spend too much time talking about these because Saga decks are pretty prevalent. But I do want to take a second before we move on to talk about counter manipulation, because that's what your commander is doing. So a perfect card for this deck is Resourceful Defense. Whenever a permanent you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on target permanent you control. Lore counters, go to another saga and rush through another saga. +1/+1 counters, go to another permanent and buff that creature. This deck cares all about counters. This card is perfect.
Yeah. And then we have like Power Conduit, just to be able to remove a counter from your sagas to be able to reuse them. Same thing with
buff your commander.
And buff your commander. Same thing with Scholar of New Horizons. Being able to remove those lore counters to ramp is going to be really powerful. And I think you're absolutely right in that this is a saga/enchantment deck that you don't actually want that many, because the fact that his ability is only once each turn minus Birgi, you don't really benefit from having a lot of sagas in play. You really just want one that you're going up and down through.
Right.
And so it's just like play him, have one in play. You don't need play him and have 5 in play.
Right. And that's the kind of saga that's worth putting in this deck, is one that's worth going up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. Yeah. Because the more you have in play, the less you're actually getting value out of your commander.
Yeah. He really just has one story to tell that he just tells everybody at all the parties he's at. It's just that one story over and over again. It's like,
one time I was in the Rowan games. Hey, one time I was in the Rowan games.
Every party he goes to, he says the same story.
And then I drew 2 cards, and then I gained a counter, and then I drew 2 cards. And fair warning, this isn't exactly the kind of saga deck that we've seen in the past. It's one saga that you're really just manipulating.
Yep.
But saga decks can tend to be very... you make a ton of different tokens, and you're controlling a bunch of commanders, and you're drawing a lot of cards, and none of this stuff seems to be related. They can be very overwhelming to pilot. So try and limit the amount of triggers you put in this kind of deck and really focus your energy on dealing damage with your commander, getting value out of those sagas. Make sure you know exactly what you want out of this deck before you just start throwing random sagas in.
Yeah.
All right.
This next one is so
obsessed.
Cool.
He's awesome.
Yeah. So we have Sokrates, Athenian teacher, 1, a white and a blue for a 0/4 legendary creature human advisor, has defender. Sokrates has hexproof as long as it's untapped, and it has Socratic dialogue. Tap until end of turn, target creature gains. If this creature would deal combat damage to a player, prevent that damage. This creature's controller and that player each draw half that many cards rounded down.
Half of the prevented damage.
Yes.
So if they attack you with a 4/4, you prevent that damage, you draw 2, you draw 2.
Yeah.
It's the power of conversation.
It is.
We each learn something
together
in that exchange, and no harm was done. The flavor is so good.
It perfectly nailed it. And it does a little bit of annoying things to your opponents, which is also so perfect for Sokrates.
Just have you thought, excuse me, Mr. Dinosaur.
Yeah.
Have you considered sharing?
It's so good.
Have you considered that what makes you smart is knowing you know nothing? You're like, Sokrates, I'm trying to kill you.
You're like, I'm just trying to fight, trying to war. And he's like, let me talk you out of it.
Predictably, with a commander that has a tap ability, you're going to want ways to untap him, especially because he's hexproof when he's untapped.
Yeah.
And you really want to be able to threaten this activation all the time.
Yeah.
So Manamo School at Water's Edge that can untap a legendary permanent. 1,000-year elixir.
Same thing.
Freed from the real.
Freed from the real. Patriarch seal.
Yeah.
They've given us quite a few of these over the years. And not only be able to reuse him, but also at instant speed give him hexproof is really good. It's going to be like, if you have any of those, your opponents aren't going to go to remove him because it's just like, oh, you just tap your artifact and then you just you just prevented my thing.
Right.
So.
It's built-in protection for Sokrates.
Yeah.
He's like, I have the power of knowledge. This looks like a sort of a group huggy deck, but like all group hug decks, it's a little less group hug than you think.
Yeah.
So this deck is going to play a lot of ways to make the card draw either hurt your opponents or benefit you more than it benefits them. So we're going to talk about some ways to make this break parity a little bit. Sorry, Sokrates. But let's introduce Heliod, the Radiant Dawn. The first side doesn't matter, but the back side.
Yeah, you may cast spells as though they had flash, and spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn.
Nice.
And Sokrates makes your opponents draw. So you're just going to be able to be like, oh, you drew 2 cards, you drew 3 cards, my spells are now 3 less, and also I can play at instant speed. It's really good.
That's so sweet. I've always liked this card. He's very powerful. Obviously, you can put in Smothering Tide.
Yeah, if you want to be a bully.
Smothering Tide. Sokrates loves taxes.
Famously love taxes.
That's canon.
Fairy Mastermind is solid with that when your opponent's going to be reliably drawing more than 1 card. Consecrated Sphinx, sure. You can actually get use out of Smuggler's Share. First time ever that card's actually triggered.
I love the Council of 4 in this deck because it
cool.
feels very similar to Sokrates. This is a 5-mana legend. It's a human noble. It says whenever a player draws their second card during their turn, you draw a card. Great. Whenever a player casts their second spell during their turn, you get a 2/2 knight who gives you a little body, gives you a huge defensive piece, and just says, like, we're just having a conversation.
Yeah. I bet you they studied Sokrates, the Council of 4.
Yeah.
They seem very much cut of the same cloth, you know? Another cool card, even the score, X blue, 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 but it costs blue, blue, blue less to cast if opponent has drawn 4 more cards this turn, which you can pretty reliably do with Sokrates, and you just draw X. So X mana draw X is crazy.
That rate is absurd.
That is, yeah. A card that I know that you love, Psychic Possession.
Imagine being psychically possessed by Sokrates himself.
You enchant a player, whenever they draw a card, you draw a card. So you're just like, oh, we'll both draw 2, but then I'm also going to draw 2 more.
What that probably means is they don't attack you.
Yeah.
But that's okay too.
Because you can attack them.
You're right.
And fog it with your Sokrates. It's so funny. It's so neat and tidy. And then we did want to mention, if you don't want to be funny and you don't want to do all the cool things that we just mentioned, you're more on the Smothering Tithe, Consecrated Sphinx side of the aisle. There's also Arms Collector and Narset. Yeah, that is something you can do.
Though both of those say if an opponent would draw a lot of cards, they don't. The thing is about that is if you're playing Sokrates as your commander and then you're putting Narset in the deck, it feels like you just want to draw cards. And there's way easier ways to draw cards.
Yeah.
So it feels like you should build a different deck. Sokrates is very much about the political interaction and the I'll give you something if you give me something, and having the joke that's like,
the harmony,
let me
we work
talk you
together.
out of it. If you have Narset on the board, all of that's gone. All of the joke is gone. And you might as well just cast a draw spell that only draws you cards.
You might as well have just wheeled. Like, just play a wheel deck and put your Narset in it.
Yeah. You just don't need it.
Yeah. But really cool cards you can use to break parity, or like Teferi's Ageless Insight. Whenever you draw a card, you draw twice that many. Allhammer's Archive, same thing. You just put them in a deck because, again, you're going to be able to outdraw your opponents when you're doing the fun Sokrates thing.
Right. The final category is attackers. Because it's Sokrates.
Yeah. But
it does feel like you have to have creatures that can attack.
Yes, because his fog also works on your stuff, and like it's kind of cheeky where you're like, oh, I'm going to swing at you for a bunch of damage, but actually I'm going to deal none, and we're all going to draw together. Really cool one that you found.
I love this card. It's perfect in this deck too, flavor-wise. It's Weathered Sentinels. Is a 3-mana artifact creature wall with Defender, Vigilance, Reach, and Trample. And classic combination of Defender and Trample. And Weathered Sentinels can attack players who attacked you during their last turn as though it didn't have Defender. Whenever Weathered Sentinel attacks, it gets +3/+3 and gains Indestructible until end of turn. So if somebody attacks you and you give them cards, now you can attack them with a Weathered Sentinels. And in the meantime, it's a very peaceful Sentinel.
Yeah.
Unless you attack Sokrates and get at those cards. And then the Weathered Sentinels cracks back. Or it doesn't.
And
it has a nice conversation.
And when we attack, I attack you for 5, and we each draw 2 together. Because why not? You know, Sokrates is forgiving.
It feels like it's a beautiful friendship, right?
Yeah.
They attack you, you fog that, and then you both draw cards. And then you're like, great, I'll attack you, I'll fog that, and we both draw cards.
Together, yeah.
So it gives you a body, it's cheap, and it attacks with a really high power. It seems great in this deck.
I take full credit for this next one.
It's yours.
High Alert. 1, a white, and a blue for an enchantment. Each creature you control assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power. Notably, Sokrates is an 0/4. And creatures you control can attack as though they didn't have Defender. It removes his Defender. And 2, a white, and a blue, untap target creature.
Perfect.
So it gives you the untap thing we're already looking for. It lets your Sokrates attack. And he will attack as a 4/4, or any of your other, like the Weathered Sentinels, even without the thing. And they now deal damage equal to their butts. And you're probably going to end up having a lot of butts, a very defensive deck.
For sure. We've already talked about the Council of 4, which is a 0/8. I love that it turns like this is a peaceful deck into, no, it's not. It's very, very fun. Otherwise, you probably have some like Draw Matters type creatures. So like Chasm Skulker or Toothy Imaginary Friend. Both of them get bigger when you draw cards and gives you more and more to fog.
Yep.
I kind of like Dream Trawler as an attacker in this deck. It's lifelink, which is great. When it attacks, you draw a card, and then it gets pumped, but it also gives you a way to discard cards to make it hexproof. So it's a threat that you can protect. It gains you life if you need that, or it draws you a card on the attack. It's just a good sort of late game threat, which is really what you want. Plus, it's great with High Alert.
Yeah, it's a 3/5. So now it's a 5/5.
My favorite way to win with Sokrates is mill. I think it should be a mill deck.
Yeah, that's something else I didn't think about, and we didn't write this down. He's an advisor.
Is pitiless a petitioner?
He works with pitiless petitioners.
Is that it? Persistent petitioners.
Persistent petitioners. Thank you.
That's it.
That's what it is. He works with those because he's also an advisor. They also have a big butt, so you could do all the High Alert stuff, all the stuff we were talking about. So he's another place to build that deck, the Brutovac or whatever it was.
Brutovac stuff,
Brutovac, yeah. Or just other mill.
Also, mill just feels right. You're drawing them cards. You're like trying to give them more information, and then they just get too much information and then they die.
Yeah, and
combat damage feels wrong.
And it's cool because you can force them to draw those cards on your turn, which is just hilarious.
So you could do big like mill attacking creatures like Fleet Swallower attacks and target player puts the top half of their library rounded up into his or her graveyard. And the Teresian Mindbreaker is a juggernaut. It's been a juggernaut kind of day.
Yeah, it is a juggernaut.
That has the same attack trigger. So you can fog those, draw some cards, and mill half of their library.
So good.
Pretty sweet. Yeah. I love that idea.
I really want to see somebody brew this deck because it's just going to be every game you're in. It's just going to be so fun.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
All right, we got one more card we want to talk about, and it's a lot of cards. It is both one and a lot of cards.
Yeah, and we just talked about the Persistent Petitioners. This is the white version of that. Templar Knight, 1 and a white for a 3/1 creature human knight with vigilance. You can pay a white, tap 5 untapped attacking creatures you control named Templar Knight. Search your library for a legendary artifact card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. A deck can have any number of cards named Templar Knight.
Oh God, this is so hard to do.
Yeah, so you need to have at least 5. They have vigilance, so you can tap them during combat, which is what it's trying to do. But then you have to have 5, and then have also swung with them.
Right.
Which most of the other things that we have that have that clause are like, once you have them, you don't have to attack with them. You don't have to untap with them.
Yeah, So you have to have 5 3/1s in play, attack with them, pay 1, tap them. They're going to die in combat. They're 3/1s. And then you go get a legendary artifact and put it onto the battlefield.
And then try again, I guess.
This is extremely difficult to do. So the artifacts that you get have to be like the best in the game. And with this kind of strategy, the best one is going to be Thrumming Stone.
Yeah, it's cool that they do tutor it. It is a legendary artifact. So as soon as you get your next Templar Knight, hopefully that immediately replenishes your board.
Yeah,
but
Thrumming Stone has Ripple. Spells you cast have Ripple 4. So whenever you cast a spell, you may reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may cast spells with the same name as that spell from among the revealed cards without paying their mana cost. So you cast a Templar Knight, you look at the top 4, you're like, oh, a Templar Knight. You cast that, and you're like, oh, look at the top 4. A Templar Knight, I'll cast that. And you go until you stop hitting.
Yeah,
Templar
it is a
Knight.
staple in all of these type of decks. So it's cool that there is that synergy there. But again, getting that first activation is going to be so tough.
So tough. Bolus the Citadel.
Sure.
The Great Henge.
Yep. Parhelion too.
I love that. Chroma's Memorial is pretty sweet because you put it into play, they're immediately flying.
Yeah, it makes
at
them a
least
lot
you've
harder to kill.
protected them somehow.
A really cool one is Circle of Loyalty because they are knights. This spell costs 1 less for each knight you control. Creature you control get +1/+1, and whenever you cast a legendary spell, you create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance, and you can pay 4 and make a knight.
It's almost good.
It's still not great.
It's almost good though.
Yeah. Again, meshing the universes beyond, we have the Perdwin Steel Flagship. Whenever another non-token artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 2/2 white human knight creature token with this creature gets +2/+2 as long as an artifact on the battlefield under your control this turn. So again, there's that like
Knights and
knight sort of synergy thing going on, but is it very good? I don't know.
We're doing our best. This is not very good. It's very difficult to do. So you are going to have to figure out how to cheat this a little bit.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of cool ways to do it.
Yeah.
Spy Kit and similarly Psychic Paper are both equipment that you can put on any creature and give them the name Templar Knight.
Yeah.
So it helps you get like the 4th or 5th copy of Templar Knight onto the battlefield. But I think the easiest way to do this is with clone type effects, like Echoing Equation, which says choose target creature you control. Each other creature you control becomes a copy of it until end of turn, except those creatures aren't legendary if the chosen creature is legendary. So if you have 5 any creatures, you turn them all into Templar Knights, attack, activate, put an equipment into play, or put an artifact, into play.
Yeah.
There's a couple effects like that.
Yeah, like Nanojin conversion kind of does the same thing. Same thing with Sakashima's Will. So, and then we just wanted to talk about like, what are some commanders you could do the Templar Knight thing? There's Sidar Jabari. It has Eminence. Whenever you attack with one or more knights, if it's in the command zone or on the battlefield, you do loot. And then it has Flying First Strike. It's a 4/3. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you return target knight creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So you can kind of recur the Templar Knights that didn't survive the combat. And also, again, sort of doing the knight thing, you get the early loot to dig for more knights to do the thing.
Right.
So that's kind of cool. I really like Eowyn, Shield Maiden, because they're humans. They synergize really well with her ability where if another knight entered, you create 2 more human knight creature tokens. And if you control...
If another human entered.
Yeah. If another human entered, you create 2/2 red human knight creature tokens with trample and haste. And then if you control 6 or more humans, you draw a card.
Yeah, so this is card draw. It's token creation. It makes those knights matter where you start making more creatures, and then it's in blue is the main reason that I like Eowyn is you can include the Sakashima's Wells and the Nanojin conversion and that kind of thing because it gives you the tokens and the card advantage and the human synergy to make this actually work. Obviously, we're crossing some universes beyond borders here, but there's a lot of synergy there, which is nice. Also, something like Samut that's just Naya and has haste. Gives them haste and can at least mean like speed this whole Templar clock up a turn.
Yeah, it will help, but yeah, I do think you're right. I think ultimately you really want that blue.
I think the blue is pretty important for artifacts like to get the really powerful artifacts, and the copy ability is going to be a big deal. Because again, I've played a lot of Seven Dwarfs decks.
It's true, she has.
I've tried it in so many. I've literally built 3. And they're bad. They don't work very well. And this feels like that, where you're going to do a lot of work and your opponents are going to be more scared of you than your plan is good. And you're just not going to be able to keep a board together. So I would say try at your own risk. But if you're into Templar Knights, it's here's the white version. Not exactly the one we were hoping for, but it's here.
Yeah.
All right, that's all we're going to talk about for Assassin's Creed.
Yep.
A lot of really sweet cards in this deck, but before we go, we're going to talk about our favorites. Let me go first because this set means a little it's less meaningful for me.
Sure.
But my favorite is definitely Senu, keen-eyed, the bird that comes into exile and it comes back and it leaves and it's back, and it's so perfect for like a falcon, like a hunting falcon, which I assume is what it's referencing.
Yeah,
like
you basically send it out and it like scopes and is able to tag like enemies or important locations for you to give you information before you actually go in.
And then it comes back to you like a loyal bird does. I think the flavor's awesome. I think the mechanics are awesome. It's a very neat card.
Yeah. I have to say, for me, it's probably not super surprising given how much energy I had during this section, but I'd have to go with Captain Kenway.
Yeah.
I've seen that man clear the deck of a Spanish galleon like it were nothing. He's a fearsome devil. He's a fearsome dog that fights like the devil. No, seriously, they nailed the flavor with Edward Kenway. I love the fact that we're actually getting pirate that cares about vehicles.
Yeah, that's cool.
Being able to tie that knot together. And, it's a little wide and it's an interesting deck where it's like competing for the assassin pirate vehicle thing. But I think ultimately you'll build a nice vehicle deck that has pirates and assassins as the components to do it. And then just making a bunch of treasures and stealing your opponent's stuff, I think is going to be really fun and going to be really flavorful.
The flavor feels good. Yeah.
So I just think they nailed it.
It's what the pirates do.
Yeah.
Most powerful card in this set is a little tricky. There's just some neat stuff. I think Senu's got some very powerful synergies for like constructed, not necessarily for commander. But what do you think is the card that's going to be like when it comes down, you're like, oh yeah, that's a good one?
So the card that I think the card that makes me feel like that is probably the card that you're going to say.
Yeah.
But the card that I think I'm going to play the most and I'm going to see the most in play and it's just going to be consistently good is Brotherhood Regalia.
Oh, yeah.
I think it just goes in a lot of decks. It gives you just a little bit of protection that you need for your commander early. The unblockable is very good. We've never had it quite at this rate as we really went into earlier. And I think that one is really the one that's you're going to see it a lot, and I already can think of a ton of decks that I have that would like benefit from a card like this.
Yeah, it's just a better version of a card that we like to play already, but has kind of been outpaced in Whisper Silk Cloak. It means that we're going to see a lot of this, and the fact that it is good because in the ways we want it to. It's cheap to equip to Legends. It's totally unblockable. Ward 2 is great protection. It's going to be really good. I think the most busted card in the set, if we're like busted, is Havi, the Allfather. It's just Naya loop-de-doops and combos, and it's going to be really sick.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the kind of deck, like if I'm playing an upper end power level, I love being able to like be so resilient that my opponents just can't deal with what's happening. But it is definitely going to be one of those where it's like, can you win? Please win.
Yeah. Well, at some point, you'll get there. Just tell us when I'm dead.
To the listeners, Assassin's Creed fans, does this set meet your expectations for the universe? What are the flavor wins? What are the flavor fails? And what new cards slot perfectly into your existing commander decks? Maybe you're building an Assassin's Creed deck. Maybe you're not. There's a lot of sweet new stuff going on. And anytime you see a character that you love and get to build around, it's very exciting. So, Universes Beyond, you've done it again.
Yeah.
If you want to pick up any of the cards that we talked about today, we talked about a lot of them, any assassins, any creeds, go to cardkingdom.com/command. They've got a huge selection of Magic singles, sealed product. If you want to pick up the new Beyond boosters, if you're interested in cracking packs for this, if you're a big Assassin's Creed fan, pick them up from Card Kingdom and you'll be supporting the show. If you're going to build one of these decks, buy all of the singles that you need for the deck in one place and get it all safely sent to you in one package. Card Kingdom's professionals, so they know that they're going to package it well and it's going to show up safe on your doorstep in a little plastic box with a little packing peanut and a sticker. I love them so much. cardkingdom.com/command. And once those cards are in your hand, you're going to need to protect them. Go over to ultrapro.com/command, support the show and support your collection.
Yeah.
Keep it safe, keep it beautiful, keep it well organized. Check out their new collection of Mana 8 products.
Yeah.
They're white and crisp and you look like it's like if you have the deck box and the sleeves and the playmat, it's just like, whoa.
Yeah, you just look nice.
What is that?
You're all done up.
It's like a 3-piece suit situation.
It really is.
You know?
It truly is.
That's what it feels like.
Like that's a classy individual right there.
Especially if you're like Jimmy or Josh and you've got like a color that is true to your identity, where you're like, I'm a blue player, I'm a red player. You can really deck it out with the Mana 8 stuff. Plus, they've got the new Apex sleeves, which are awesome. If you haven't checked them out yet,
they are.
They feel amazing.
They feel really good.
And these are cool and crisp.
And I just really, really love the idea of putting my Ezio deck in that white and red one. It's just going to be so clean.
ultrapro.com/command. Before we go, we're going to say thank you to our amazing team at the Command Zone. Thank you to Eric Lem for editing this episode, you hero, Gaurav Galati, Jordan Pridgeon, Jamie Block, Arthur Meadowcroft, Manson Lung, Josh Murphy, Jake Boss, Sam Waldo, Evan Limburger, Katie Cole, Mitch Trafford, Jimmy Wong, Josh Lee Kwai, and of course to Damen Lenz for talking Assassin's Creed with us here today. Universes Beyond is so much more fun when you know the universe beyond. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with us and getting excited about this set with me.
I really need to add Assassin's Creed consultant to my resume, because both for this and for the Game Nights episode, they keep pulling me in. They're like, hey, what can we do here? Like, what's a good like reference thing here? Like, what is that talking about? Like, what's the joke here? What's the inside thing? And I'm like, okay, let me explain this. This is the lore. This is how it works. So
you're the Havi, not the Sigurd, your bearded god of storytelling. I am
the Sigurd telling the stories of the many adventures of the assassins. It's been really fun. Like we just talked about the Animus the other day, and I made a whole tweet about it. I was explaining to you what the Animus is, and you're like, yeah, so it's just the tanning bed of Christmas past. It's like, yeah, kinda. Yeah. You just kind of view like past events, and you don't like change them, but you view them.
But you watch them.
Yeah, you view
from
memories.
A tanning bed.
Yeah, from a tanning bed.
And you come out beach bronzed, baby. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for your attention. For further inquiries, send an email to commandcast@rocketjump.com or ask us on Twitter @JFWong and @Josh Lee Kwai. See you later, alligator.
Greetings, humans.